Founder and Director of Mental Health Awareness of Michiana. And I'm delighted to welcome you today. And thank you for being here despite the rain. It's really not a great start to our day, but we're all here. And I'd like to welcome you to the 2023 Mental Health Summit Innovation and Prevention Strategies. This is our second fall mental health summit, and our goal with these large public events is to bring the community together to talk about mental health and resources. The summit gives us a chance to hear from local organizations about their work and how they are addressing specific concerns, and encourages all of us to think about ways we can partner with each other. So we have over 35 individuals and organizations participating in today's summit. We encourage you to visit the resource table, grab a snack in the ballroom, whatever point you want to. And we do value your feedback. So when the summit ends, we do ask if you would do an evaluations on the back of your program, maybe a QR code, and there is a link that I'm sending. You can register to receive the evaluation. So please give us feedback about today. We're also recording today's event, and so that'll be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and that's available to anybody who's interested in watching it. So please help spread the word and share information about the event. I have a number of thank yous for today. So I'd like to thank our event sponsors, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, the Shaw Center for Children and Families, THK Law Office, HealthLink, and MDWise. Their support allows us to provide this event free to the community, and I'd love it if you could join me in thanking them. I'd also like to thank our partner for the summit, the St. Joseph County Public Library. We feel very fortunate to have this beautiful space to host these types of events. So we want to thank the library staff who joined our programming committee, the planning committee, Tyler Flores, Matt Anderson, Ari Lopez, and also thank our planning committee members, Carl Hetler, Reagan Lanier, Jennifer Carter, Jen Lefevre, Jan Maribel, Takesha Jacobs, and Amanda Rhodes. And thank you to our Notre Dame NeuroDev students, Lily Moss, Lizzie Petrosky, and Eli Cervase for their help today. So thank you. So as we were envisioning today, the idea of the food drive came up. Charles suggested it, and as did the summit coinciding with the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. Rabbi Michael Friedland and his wife Lizzie Fagan have been very generous in educating us about the holiday and how it ties in with our goals for the summit. So I would actually like to welcome Rabbi Michael Friedland to the stage. Rabbi Friedland is the rabbi of Sinai Synagogue in South Bend. He has served there since 1996, and in addition to his rabbinical degree, he has a doctorate in Jewish literature. So please join me in welcoming Rabbi Friedland.
Yes, it is the holiday of Sukkot. I told Lisa earlier, it always rains during Sukkot, so this is nothing unique. Because the Jewish calendar is both lunar and solar, this holiday always falls in the autumn. Sometimes it's end of September, sometimes beginning of October. It doesn't matter. It always rains. It's always 30 degrees. This week has been absolutely gorgeous weather until today. And I guess the weather decided that, you missed the rain so far. We'll give you 7 days of rain like today. So it didn't work out that way. We don't have the sukkah outside, but you do have a representation of a sukkah in the foyer. And the reason why we build a sukkah during the 7-day holiday is because the Torah, the book of Leviticus, tells us that the verse says that God says, because I made you to dwell in booths in Sukkot during your 40 years of wandering. The idea is that when the children of Israel left Egypt, they had to dwell in the desert for 40 years, and they were protected by these booths, by these Sukkot. Now, there's two explanations of what the Sukkot were. It wasn't that God made you to dwell in them. One is that they just were like a simple booth that people put together, and God's protection was there to make sure that nothing dangerous happened, because these were out in the desert, people were out in the desert, animals, heat, drought, and God's protective nature allowed the people to dwell in these Sukkot and be safe. The other explanation is that when it says God made you to dwell, it means it wasn't a natural booth, it was a supernatural booth. These were clouds of glory in which God's presence protected the people as they dwelt in the desert for 40 years. And so therefore the key part of a sukkah is actually the roof. The roof has to be made out of natural materials. And even though the idea is that you sometimes say, oh, you should see the sky up above through the roof, it actually can't be so full that it has to allow rain to fall through. So rain has to come through it. The idea is because these roofs are fragile. We are supposed to live in these temporary dwellings during this week to remind ourselves that even though it's the end of the holiday season, at the end of the produce season, all of the harvest is in, so it's a good time. We have all of our food for the rest of the year. If you're a farmer, you've got all the food, the harvest has come in. Nevertheless, it's a fragile time. And these booths represent the fragility of life, and that we can't rely only on ourselves, but on, in a religious sense, on God. I think it's very appropriate for your theme today of mental health awareness. Having any kind of issue with mental health, or a family that has an issue with mental health members, causes fragility. A fragility for the individual who might be dealing with the mental health issues, or for the family that has to deal with their loved one who's suffering from that. And the answer is, well, yeah, the children of Israel may have depended on God in the desert. In our world, we have to depend on each other. And so it's very, very important. So Sukkot is, in that sense, a very appropriate metaphor for what this organization, this awareness is trying to do. That for those of us who care about people who are dealing with mental health issues, we have to be that protective cloud, those 4 walls or 3 walls to protect the individuals, to make sure they're okay, and then to know that you can't fix yourself. You can't expect to fix yourself. You really need community, you need family, you need professionals. So as we are celebrating the holiday of Sukkot at this time, I wish you a very successful day, and to remember the importance of this message of Sukkot, that life is fragile, but you can be protected if the community is there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that part of it was a height issue. So we're getting ready for Dr. Bryant, who's shorter than Rabbi Friedland. So I think it'll be better once Dr. Bryant is up here. Thank you so much, Rabbi Friedland. That was really lovely. Okay, so I have to read Dr. Bryant's introduction. So I have to let go of this. Let's see what it says. Okay. So our focus today is on community prevention strategies, and this afternoon we'll focus on initiatives, collaborations, and advocacy going on in Michiana that address difficult issues facing the community. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Dave Bryant to give our keynote address, Acid-Based Trauma Response. Dr. Bryant is a community psychologist and leader of social justice initiatives with over 20 years of bringing together individuals with diverse mindsets in order to facilitate equity and empowerment. She's the director of, gosh, that part got edited out. It's a social action, project. Sorry about that. Dedicated to understanding the deep roots of how justice is betrayed by society and using the healing power of the arts to restore balance. She's an activist and an academic affectionately known as Rashida, or Wise One by members of her healing circle. Dr. Bryant has taught courses from undergrad to master's level in social justice, trauma-informed psychology, and interfaith activism at IUSB since 1990. She's built platforms to increase public discourse on social justice, such as the Public Intellectuals Forum at the IUSB Civil Rights Heritage Center. She's pioneered ways to extend teaching beyond textbooks and into communities, earning Indiana University's highest teaching award and the highest award for linking teaching, research, and community building. Dr. Bryant's experience building communities in difficult political environments has taken her to Nigeria, South Africa, Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda, and Haiti, and Mexico City. She is, among others, a co-founder of Black Lives Matter South Bend. Dr. Bryant's current work includes the use of storytelling to overcome trauma, an initiative of the Social Action Project. She's also part of a group that's a Spanish name, Grupo de Trabajo Afrodescendientes, something like that. A working group on mental health awareness and alternative medicines among Afro-Latin peoples. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Bryant.
Hello. Hello. It's good to see all of you out there. And I'm really glad to be here today, weather and all. You know, it comes with the territory. Here we are in the Midwest. This is what it does. So let me make sure I've got the technology right here. And I'm just supposed to hit. Okay. We're gonna. Oh. Okay. All right, I think I have it together here. As you heard, my name is Bryant, and I am at IU South Bend in the psychology department. I'm a community psychologist. And what that means is, community psychology means my training is in clinical psychology, as well as in political science, sociology, understanding what's the interconnection between the individual and the problems they may be having, and the society in which they must dwell. So not only am I asking what's wrong, what's happening for you, why are you here today? I'm also asking what's going on in the environment around you that may have gotten you here, and what can we do about both of those things, which broadens the question for psychology. In fact, I got to community psychology because the question wasn't broad enough. I was taught to use the diagnostic and statistical manual like every good clinician is. But the problem was, when I tried to use that manual to get the things that the people who were depending on me to do this, I couldn't make it fit. It wouldn't work. And so I went looking for a way I could do what I felt was good psychology and still be able to navigate the mental health system as it existed, hence community psychology. I always try to begin with, so what are we talking about here? I titled this talk, We Don't Need Another Hero, because we're really in this phase where we're looking for that one person. You're in our culture, you're in our country, maybe not you or me or anyone we know, but there are a whole bunch of folks who are looking for somebody to swoop in and take care of. Just make it better. Be my hero. And we put them up on a pedestal, and we bring them the things to make them feel wanted and welcome, but it doesn't work that way, which is why we're focused on community responses. And in community, we need all of us. We need all of us bring whatever it is our skills are to the table to find a resolution or a solution or promote healing, or all of the things we're going to be talking about for the rest of this session that we have today. So, community psychology is about justice and research, empowerment. It's always multidisciplinary, it's local, it's global, it's about well-being, it's about all of these things, which is a much broader scope, which is why I always start off explaining to people how come a psychologist is coming to talk to people about community interventions. Because the typical image that people have of a psychologist is the desk and the lamp and the guide and the cape and all of that. And that's not the way community operates. And I, in particular, look at community in terms of how do we take care of that mismatch that happens between the individual and their environment. Looking at larger questions that are systemic questions that have to do with inequities that exist, that are language that seems to many people to be beyond what psychology is supposed to be doing. And that's where my earliest supervisors and I parted company, because I kept asking these questions. I wanted to know, what did I do? Tech, what did I do? I didn't mean to. It came back as tech done. Okay. I will not touch that button. It's about inequities. It's about bigger questions than what does the diagnostic manual tell us? We learned very early in our careers, professionals, you know this word, exacerbate. What causes that thing to get even worse? Well, not only in terms of that individual and how they operate or not, but also in terms of what's going on around them. Find the language and start incorporating the language about what is going on in those larger environments. Because when they finish with us, they go back out there and they face those things out there. And no matter how hard that individual is working or that family is trying to make change, if they go right back into those environments that made this possible for them to have to deal with, then we haven't done our work. That's what community looks like. Specifically, the Social Action Project is about doing all of those things. I'll talk all you might want to hear about that after I'm done with this. But we are on a really tight schedule, so I want to move us along. The Social Action Project uses the arts. Everybody can start with the arts, even those people who say, no, I can't, I don't know how to draw, I can't sing. No, it is a way to start a conversation. And the projects that we do involve the arts in as many forms. Looking at trauma response, how can we do that using spoken word? How can we do that using storytelling? What are some of the ways we can address understanding who are the people before us? Polly Murray, who I will also talk about as long as anybody wants to listen to me. We have forgotten them. We forgot them in history for a lot of reasons. But we're finally making contact again and trying to understand that story. And understanding stories is what gets us to understanding what is that interconnection, what's happening at the crossroads for people. One of the other questions I get from people is how can you take these huge questions and find a way to focus on them? And I start by saying, you have to take it apart. You have to break it up into pieces and decide how it is you want to enter into this question. Sometimes you can start with very basic understandings. You can just much like doing a recipe. There's a recipe, there's a script, you run it. You have a fairly high success rate because it's been tested and standardized, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes you need more. Sometimes it has to do, it's more like creating a rocket. A rocket is much more complex. You still have a certain script because there are some rules of physics that you have to follow, but overall, once you get all those pieces together and you bring in all those folks who've got knowledge, then your rocket is going to fire and it's going to come back and everything will be okay with relative predictability. Sometimes, like raising children, it is much less predictable. It requires that we think on our feet, that we have a tool chest that we can draw from so that we can address whatever is coming up today. If we think about these issues that we're going to be talking about for the rest of this afternoon, in terms of what are the ways we may be able to enter into them, and what are some of the things that we might need to do in terms of knowledge or resources or mindsets, then we can talk about these complex problems. The other thing I tell people is think about the processes that are at work out there. The hourglass model of social functioning is not new. This was created by Dr. Levine back in 1952, I think it was. He said we have to think about power in terms of who's got it and who gets got. The people who have the power are the people at the top of this hourglass. The people who need things, commodities, resources, services, are at the bottom of the hourglass. And in the middle, in that very narrow channel, are the people who are the gatekeepers. And those gatekeepers are the people who get to say what comes from up high to the people who are down at the bottom of the hourglass. Sometimes those gatekeepers are humane and compassionate, and it makes it possible for people to live the life that they'd like to live, and other times they're not. But we have to think about how that process works, and then we can talk about, so what can we do? Do we need a recipe? Do we just need resources? Or is this something we just have to make up as we go along? And be comfortable with that. We have to decide what kind of change do we want. Community psychology talks about first order change or second order change. These different types of changes aren't one is better than the other. It's about what is it you would like to accomplish. Do you want to change the whole system? Or do you want to rearrange how resources and information are moved along? It depends on timelines, it depends on availability of talent, it depends on many things. And you can progress from one to the other. You may drop back when you need to reach some new level that, and you have evaluated that you now are back to moving things around. But it's a fluid choice. It's a choice of understanding what kinds of things allow for individuals to have the life that they would like to have. We talk equity. When I'm talking to my students, we talk about what that means. We talk about the difference between equity and equality. We talk about the difference between equity, equality, and social justice. We can make it so everybody has the same supports and will be treated equally. We can make it so individuals get different supports so that they can gain access. We can also talk about how to remove the barriers in the first place. That may be a longer term, but that's part of what we agreed to do. It's part of the work made before us. And in any given moment or historical moment, we are making decisions as the people who are in many ways at the top of that hourglass. They're making decisions about how it is people may be able to get the types of things that they need. The power cube is another way I like to tell people to think about power. Think about power in its various forms. Asset-based community mental health, being about power, has to do with how well you understand different levels of power, local, global, national, different forms of power. You can be invisible and be very powerful. Ask the secretary. Who's the one in charge of the office? I guarantee you it's not the person with the door and plaque and fancy desk. It's the secretary. That man will be in a meeting for 6 months if you don't get due that consent. So think about power not only as positional, but think about it as influence. And think about it in terms of the types of places that we find power. And make decisions about what level, keep doing that, let me stand over here, about where it is you want to move into. Individuals, you want to start in groups, you want to look at social issues, the larger justice questions. That's all definitional, and it all helps us to make good sense of what we believe mental health is. What's its nature? How do we avoid those generalizations that make us feel good but don't necessarily impart information or give us a roadmap for what we can do next? How do we think about how these elements are interrelated with one another? If we are looking at policy, how does that relate to what's impact on institutions? What's its impact on individuals? When we change the laws, if the government shuts down and services aren't paid for, is that a theoretical question? I bet you it's not to that person who ends up without those resources. But we have to think about that for the fact. And because we're talking specifically about community here, we have to define what community is. Because I guarantee you, with all of us in the room here, we have at least 25 different versions of what community is. None of them are wrong, but they are different. So we have to learn to articulate, what do I mean as I'm standing here in this group when I talk about community? And how is it related to bigger issues like constitutional rights? We're in a huge debate over constitutional rights that affect everyday life for a woman who is making decisions about reproductive health, or a parent who's making decisions about books in libraries. We are affected by these huge social issues. We may not want in this moment to look at that question, but we can't ignore that it's out there. And make decisions about whether we will move into or move toward addressing them. So we have a tool chest we could use. I tell this to my students all the time, I tell it to all the groups I ever talk to. We sometimes lose sight, much like with the diagnostic manual, which was, we're up to 5 now, and we'll never have another one because we want it to be aligned with the international classification of diseases. So they're never going to print another one, they'll just make changes every now and then. So we have this massive document. In front of it, it's frequently used disorders. Like frequently called numbers used to be back when we had telephone books. I used this example in the class once and I got these funny faces. You know, what? But we can do that because there's a script. We know the script. We get reinforced with the script. But I want us to think larger, think about the array of tools we have before us. We know about psychotherapy and its various forms. We know about paraprofessionals, even though they're kind of new in the history of psychology. The Joint Commission gave us paraprofessionals and all of the things that come along with having paraprofessionals in terms of training, in terms of access, all of that. We know that we have community support networks. There's been research that's been done, published in peer-reviewed journals about the efficacy of community support networks. The fact that people will come and talk to the lady in the blue house, and everybody in the neighborhood knows who that is. They'll go talk to her when they won't talk to their partner. So how do we use that? How do we leverage that to provide the kind of response that we would like to have in terms of problems that people are dealing with? We have advocacy, many of you, I read in the list of people who are here with us today that we have people who identify themselves as advocacy organizations. We decide where it is we're going to go into the question, how it is, does it align with the way we're thinking about the larger mental health issues? Some of us are community organizers, thinking about power, who has it, who doesn't, how do we shift it, how do we shape it and influence it? I saw in our literature that we're talking about primary prevention. This is a question I get from students all the time. If it didn't happen, how can we prove it? Well, that's part of our work, is to be able to identify what can we point to say that this intervention that I did is a primary prevention intervention, and therefore the thing that I was trying to not have happen again. I mean, that's a fluid type of literature right now, and you can do primary prevention. So part of our task, but it's an important part of our task, is to be able to provide that kind of evidence-based, that's a word that I find everywhere, you do too. And you're writing grants, or you're making final reports, or you're trying to explain to someone who just doesn't get this whole community stuff. How do you know? In research, systematically, intentionally, deliberately presented, informed, and shaped. Making decisions about experimental as compared to non-experimental, making decisions about where it is you want to send this information so you can justify the primary prevention efforts you're involved with. Making sure that you're taking into account ethical considerations. I know, as a psychologist, we all did the same training. I had faced the same questions. Psychologists have a terrible reputation. And in the bad old days, we earned it. We earned that checkered past where we thought of participants as subjects. and we manipulated them, and we did bad things. And so part of our responsibility as the new generation of scientists is to be aware of ethical issues, but we need to do the science. We need to do the evidence, gathering the evidence and putting it together, presenting it. You have to get comfortable talking in that language because that's what's going to move those folks up at the top of the hourglass who aren't interested in our passion. They don't care about our commitment and devotion to the issues or the causes of the people. They want you to give them evidence. So thinking about how do we generate that evidence, that's a part of our work as well. And so as I'm marrying and she seems to be doing okay because I haven't seen the license yet. I've been watching. It doesn't look like I have been, but I have been. I tell that to my students too. Yeah, I don't look like I'm looking at you, but I am. I can tell what you do with that. As I'm wrapping this up, I want us to think about words, especially because we are passionate and we are dedicated. I want us to think about words that come to us so easily. And we think we're doing good, but we may be not. I want us to think about issues related to death and dying. We have no choice. COVID made it impossible for us not to address this. We as a culture don't do death and dying. We're not comfortable with it. We don't think about it. If you talk about it, you're being morbid. People worry about it. And actually, the one experience we can count on all human beings have is the experience of death. So we also need to think about the words that we use to talk about death and dying. Dying is social. Death is by statute. It depends on how it's defined by the state in which an individual is living. That sets up a whole new set of power dynamics when we're talking about issues related to death and dying. We also have to recognize the social construction of sexuality. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but we lose sight of that sometimes in our zeal. We have acronyms that we use. We have ways of asking questions about gender and gender identity, about sexuality and sexual function. We have all this language. And I want us to remember that that language applies to people who live in communities who have a huge variety within them. And then not lose sight of that, even as we are working so hard for a resolution. I want us to think about concepts of divinity. The other thing that in many ways goes along with death and dying. How do I think about my relationship with whatever my definition of the divine might be? And what does that mean in terms of what I'm willing to do in the here and now to be able to address those or to live up to those ideals and notions? Psychology doesn't do religion either. There is a division of religion in the American Psychological Association, and their literature reads, they're all experimentalists. And so we kind of label religion on it, but it looks a lot like all the rest of the research that psychology does. So we took philosophy out of it. We took all of that, we took it out, and because it's easier, psychology has to count when we talk about research. But spirituality is a motivating factor for the things that all of us do in a variety of ways, being sensitive to that and recognizing that we have so much diversity even here in South Bend in terms of spiritual beliefs and taking that into consideration. Looking at how we functionally can understand a belief tradition, whatever that might be, because those functions are why people continue to follow these traditions. And the things I need and I want, and what is getting me, which gets us to power analysis. Who can I talk to? What kind of advocacy and what are the links I can make? And if you would like, I can provide you with some references of the things I spewed. Put on your seatbelts, please. You're moving really fast. So, questions? We have a mic here, that one's. You might have questions.
You explain more about what you just talked about, the power structure, delegates like the power.
The people in the middle are the gatekeepers. They're the ones who get to say, what are the rules for being able to have access to housing or education or mental health services. So in a lot of ways, the gatekeepers are the critical people in this power analysis because they open the spigot or they close it. And the fact that we live in a society that has this hierarchical structure means that there are a whole bunch of types of resources that are at the top of the hourglass. And a bunch of folks at the bottom of the hourglass who might need them. But the gatekeepers who are in charge of that very narrow channel tell you what forms you have to fill out, or what days appointments are available. Or that secretary who just doesn't like the way you look today. These are people who matter. And so that analysis has to be a part of how we deliver services.
That hierarchy that you talked about. And their gatekeepers, it seems to me like when you mention about positional power, that's that narrow scope, but if they're developing themselves as a gatekeeper, personal power, would that get out ultimately more will? From positional power to personal.
If they had more personal power, would that make them bad in their positional? Possibly. That's how I handle this.
Say much I appreciate that. Super talking about that. I
Sure, yes. It's so critical, especially now, it's really high relief now that we've had 2 years and counting in COVID. But it's always been, people have always struggled with this and that. And as a culture, here in North America, especially in the US, we just don't do that well. We don't do it well. Yeah, okay.
So with that.
Identifying who those gatekeepers are, first of all, and what kind of power is it that they have? Is it positional? I'm sorry, I already lost my screen. Is it positional or is it personal? Is it for the secretary? It's personal. It's her complete power and how it is she's interacting with people. But positionally, she doesn't really have a lot of power. The person who's got the desk and the door and the lamp, that person has power. But you can educate people. You can strike up relationships. You can figure out ways to be able to talk to one another, even if we are at opposite ends of some issue or concern, so that it's developing those relationships that allows us to change the way the gatekeepers work. And from there, then you do the assessment to decide, well, the tools I could use, which one shall I? In order to continue to move toward that, ensure that goal that you set. Questions?
Over here.
Oh, okay.
You said we take out the philosophical in research, but isn't that what psychology is all about? Is that where it stemmed from?
Yes, psychology started off as philosophers. We were philosophers, we were clerics, we were priests, we were people who looked outside the concrete. We became a concrete science with the arrival of scientific manipulation. Wilhelm Wundt, these very scientific studies and experiments that shifted it. Up until then, psychology was philosophy. Yes. Some of us are reading that back. Okay, well, I'll be around for today. So if something comes to you, then we can talk.
Three panelists here that represent organizations working with some of the most challenging issues in our community. Each panelist will take a turn explaining and describing their initiatives, and then we will open the floor up for some questions afterwards. So now I'm happy to start the introductions. The first introduction that I'm going to make is for Dr. Theodore Beauchesne, is the founding director of the Notre Dame Suicide Prevention Initiative, which will open for clinical services later this year. He seeks to identify children who are vulnerable to suicide years before a potential event, before they connect to systems of care. He believes bold, plain-spoken, outside-the-box thinking is needed to address the suicide crisis in the United States, and that meaningful change can only happen if families and communities are resourced and empowered. And then we have Robin Vida. Robin is the Director of Health Outreach, Promotion, Education at the St. Joseph County Health Department and Chair of Partnership for Drug-Free St. Joseph County. And then we have Corey Sutton Sr. is the Director of Operations of the Ray of Hope Foundation in Elkhart, Indiana, and Corey is kindly standing in for Angela Tanner. And I would like to hand it over to Ted, if you would mind getting us started.
I want to thank folks for the invitation to come down today. And I wanted to apologize. You're not supposed to start anything with an apology, but I have to do it. For dozing off on Dr. Bryant, that we have a brand new addition to the family. There's no sleep in my house. And then also, I arrived here a couple of years ago, came from Ohio State to Notre Dame, and so I had quite a time last weekend. And I was rooting for Notre Dame. I will again next time. I was disappointing, but I just thought I'd say that. I hadn't arrived from Columbus not that long ago. I arrived to establish the Suicide Prevention Initiative at Notre Dame, as everyone here knows, is aware, I'm sure, that we have crisis in the U.S. The crisis is disproportionately affecting certain communities. We have, for the first time ever, youth suiciding at higher rates than any other demographic group. We have the highest, highest suicide rate in the United States compared to the Western nations. 30 years ago, wasn't quite that long ago, 25 years ago, when I was in graduate school, if you had told me an 8-year-old took his or her own life, I said, no way, there's some other explanation. Now, we don't ask that question anymore. We assume it's correct. 25 years ago, we used to look at the rates of suicide in Northern Europe. We thought that's wrong. Now we're twice their rate. They've come down and we've gone up. We have suicide is the second leading cause of death among youth in the U.S. and it's sixth in the next nearest country. So what's going on? And we need all the troops on the ground that we can get to be in the communities learning. And that's what we're here for. We don't have answers, no one does right now. But we need to listen and learn and be willing to ask our questions. That was a question to what to do. And I would love to hear from folks here rather than talk. Thanks. And we spent our first couple of years sort of establishing some resources and getting our feet on the ground. Now we're bringing on new people into our group. We just, I don't know, embarrassing, but we just onboarded a new person yesterday. We're sort of ready to open the doors. So here, this is exactly the right place to be. I want to listen to what the community needs are. Suggest that we know what to do. We're not sure what to do. We have one of the lowest rates of availability, if you will, of mental health services of any urban area. We're at the 30th percentile. So 70% of communities have better access than we do, and that's in a country that doesn't have good access. So I don't know too big picture, but we want to be invested in the community and involved in the community, and we're getting up to the place where we have enough people to do that. And so I'm happy to be here, and I'm interested in hearing from anyone who has any ideas. I'm new to South by myself. 2 years is not that long.
So this is my first year being right now I'm in the middle, so I have 4 students at school that need and I have another student who desperately needs residential has to stay several times. And that's kind of my biggest question is like this chronic suicidal ideation, this chronic attempts, and what's the best way that I can
I'd love to talk. Yeah, after this is done, one-on-one. One of our goals is to be available and to get into schools and to provide services for some kids who need them. The need is, of course, so high. We've placed that, in some sense, as one of our, I don't want to say long-term goals, but longer-term goals, because we don't have the personnel right now, but we can have contact, and so let's talk. It's hard to offer any advice without knowing a little more, but I can't imagine compared with when I was a kid at that age. Yeah, no one was talking about this. Oh yeah, sure. Sure. Yeah, then I'll just pass it on to the next person.
Oh, yes. Okay. Don't hear me? No.
Perfect. Ooh, gosh. I'm a mom to young boys, so I scream. So I'm gonna back that up a little bit. I spoke this morning at the Indiana Criminal Justice Association's annual conference on substance use. They didn't even give me a mic. So I will do my best to not use my strong mom voice, as my 8-year-old calls it. Yeah, to echo, I think Ted's comments and thanks to MHAM for hosting this afternoon. I've been with the St. Joseph County Department of Health for quite a bit of time, working on a piece of my role, specifically looked at mental health relates to substance use prevention efforts, and had tried, I shouldn't say even had tried, we had been working towards mirroring some of our overdose and substance use efforts with suicide prevention, and that's where we are so grateful that Ted and I have had lots of talks and discussions, because that is such a dramatic need in our community. And I could talk on and on and on and on and on about public health, and today I'm talking to you guys about substance use. So from the Department of Health's perspective, or let me put my public health hat on, I should say. We are the county's Narcan distributor, so we supply naloxone, the opioid reversal drug, to community partners, organizations, higher education institutions, all K-12 institutions, anyone who wants it here within St. Joseph County limits. That's how we first began our efforts in substance use, was the need to provide that direct service. And then it's taken us a few years to really understand what is a local health department's role in addressing substance use, since we never will actually do medication-assisted treatment or have a treatment inpatient facility, right? Where does that local public health point come in? And it is very much in the convening of stakeholders, coordination of efforts, and utilizing best practices. So really that community macro level. A lot of the members here today are members of our drug-free community coalition. It's called the Partnership for Drug-Free St. Joseph County. It is a requirement through the state of Indiana that every community house an LCC, a local coordinating council. That began in an effort to take and utilize monies that are donated through court fees and those types of things that they then are redistributed to partner organizations that are basically working on the reason somebody would have been assessed those court fees. That was the original goal and mission of local coordinating councils. If you Google LCC in the state of Indiana, you will see all 92 of them. We operate on a comprehensive community plan. So the funding I just mentioned goes in connection with a comprehensive community plan that the coalition has developed to ultimately address substance use. Our goal is first decreasing overdose fatality, then decreasing non-fatal overdoses, and ultimately decreasing first use at all. And as you can imagine, as we get further and further from mortality, we move more upstream, that work gets harder. So our coalition specifically is that convener of the people doing the work, whether it be in primary prevention, education at the schools, drug disposal, other Narcan distribution efforts, hospital systems, mental health, treatments, criminal justice, recovery. All of those members convene underneath the partnership. And they all play their own little role in that overall plan. And then the partnership as a whole provides support and resources, whether that be through the grant funding I mentioned, other administrative dollars for events, speakers, town halls, you name it. The advantage with that coalition right now being chaired by an individual at the Department of Health carries a little bit more leverage when we, I think just because there's more intentionality, right? Like this is an effort through the Department of Health that we're trying to make a difference here, that we at times have a little bit more opportunity to get into those harder to reach spaces. We know that overdose is happening in our community, but I think what we're less aware of is the shift in overdose of chronic users to overdose of recreational users. And one of the activities at the Department of Health is overseeing a suicide and overdose fatality review team. It's a team that meets monthly that reviews all suicides, all overdoses, looking for themes and trends for prevention. And dramatically, I have seen over this last, really since January 2023, that my age in death has gone dramatically down. So that becomes increasingly concerning because these are individuals whom are not chronically using substances, but they're individuals who may want to stay up late to study for an exam. So they think they took an Adderall from a friend and that pill's fake, and it's not Adderall at all, but just pure fentanyl. And it doesn't take much fentanyl for an individual to have fatal overdose. DEA just released last week that 7 out of 10 fake pills that they've confiscated over the last year contain a lethal dose of fentanyl. I've had to talk to way more school nurses than I would, that I ever thought I would have talked to 5 years ago when we began Narcan training, because they themselves have responded to students who have overdosed. We receive weekly 911 calls, or I should say culmination of overdose calls. And again, looking at where those overdoses take place, just I think calls to a larger call to action around normalizing having to discuss this. As I mentioned, I have small children, so I'm frequently talking to my 8-year-old about substance use, because I know in a few short years that opportunity, unfortunately, is going to present itself. So how do I ensure that I've increased his protective factors enough that he can be the leader and say, no, I'm cool, and his friends can follow him rather than following the other trajectories. So that's some of the work the partnership is working on. Again, they're this larger convening group, so we don't necessarily run programs, but we serve as connectors. Somebody comes to the partnership, they need support. We, most times say, this is the partner you should talk to, or this is the resource that exists in our community, or these are the resources that don't exist in our community. Adolescent treatment, over and over and over, I will triumph that until we have adolescent treatment available here in our community, and detox. We have just recently we get this quarterly report on the top opioids prescribed in our community. And for the first time in Q4 of 2022, buprenorphine or Suboxone, one of our medications for medication-assisted treatment, was on that list. And I was so happy that was on that list, because that meant that we were prescribing that was a top prescribing opioid for individuals who were in medication-assisted treatment and in treatment for their substance use disorder. And then on the flip side, after I thought about it, I thought, yes. I thought, oh man, there's way more than I thought there was, right? So it's always kind of this bittersweet moment in managing any sort of success, especially as we know drugs are ever evolving. As soon as we get Narcan distribution really, really well down, I'm convinced that I should say I'm convinced, I'm concerned there'll be another drug that we will have to combat. So we can't focus just on the drug, we have to focus on the reason for the drug use. And yeah, we're gonna continue trying to elevate that platform, ask the really difficult questions, continue to do the hard work, even in times when we are not sure what that answer is. But yeah, we're here, anybody is available, anybody is able to join the partnership. It's free. Again, it's a group of organizations that are working to reduce substance use and the impact it has on the lives of people who live in our community. So thank you.
Sure. We get this code.
Just gives us some.
Give us something to do, right? Good afternoon. My name is Corey Sutton. I am here on behalf of Angela Tanner, who is the CEO and president of Ray of Hope Foundation. Angela's dealing with some health issues, so I got a call this morning at 9 o'clock. Corey, can you come do this? Huh? Okay. So that's why I'm here. But really, this is Ray of Hope Foundation. I'm going to give you a little background on this. Angela, being the CEO and founder of this, started the organization along with her brother, Adrian Riley, back in 2020. And this was really the result of her own son being involved in a violent gun situation where he was killed with a gun, firearm. So Ray of Hope, Ray is his name. And really what the organization, what we're trying to do is to bring down the number. Someday, guys, I pray that we can eliminate the amount of gun violence that we have within our communities because it is rampant. But that's where the organization stemmed from, and that was the root cause of why Angela was doing this. As director of operations, I got involved in this simply because I have a passion of working with the group that we've targeted, which are 9 to 25-year-old youth in our community. In my other career before I retired, I was board chairman for a group in Atlanta, Georgia called Men's Work Inc., which is making implement the next step, which actually dealt with at-risk male and male youth. So this is very similar, and I felt really comfortable in stepping into this role. But what we are trying to do and what we are attempting to do in the community is really help these children and these young adults cope with what's been discussed already, and to help them understand you can't solve your problems at the barrel of a gun. And some of those root causes in the training that we've got some certification on, it goes back to the domestic violence, some of the anger management, some of the addiction issues that are going on, even the life skills, just how to think through and not be so angry, because a lot of these situations, social and socioeconomic situations, whether it's at school, whether it's at home, it may be a parent, it may be a friend that are putting these pressures and they want to lash out. And typically the quickest way that they have learned to do that is to use a gun. And that's not the way to go. Along with these folks, we are working with the reentry, any individuals who have been incarcerated coming back out. So we are doing training with them where we have the certification in our courses, as I mentioned, are on domestic violence. We have the MRT program, which is a moral recognition therapy. And that's typically ordered by the court. And that can be from an adult to a child if they've got problems or things that are going on with that. But those are the kind of the programs that we deal with, and we're very concerned trying to help them get their feet up underneath them and understand circumstances and how to deal with those. And, I like to call it critical thinking. That is something that's not there in the root cause and effect. Okay, if you do this, what's gonna happen? Did you even think about this? So you're taking them through that process, hopefully helping them understand and become more aware of your actions have far greater consequences than you will ever realize. And a lot of times it affects not only you, but the people around you and people you don't even know. So there's a thought process with that. A couple things that we're doing is that we have, because this is unique, Red Folk, we partner with a couple other organizations, and we always try to do that because we know we're one aspect of this whole social economic issue that we're dealing with our children and our youth. We've got to find a way. In Elkhart, we have the villages that we're working with, also with Southside Inc. and a couple other groups that we're trying to build these coalitions so we can have a holistic approach, similar to what was discussed before. We're going to be a clearinghouse and we want to be a resource. We provide a certain amount of abilities and talents to deliver on a lot of these things, but if we don't have it, we want to be able to direct somebody to where they need to go and have a conduit for that. When you're talking about the gatekeepers, Doctor, you know, if you're partnering with organizations, that's going to expand your gatekeepers because that organization may know a gatekeeper that you don't know. And that's always beneficial. One of the other things that we've learned through this process in trying to raise funds and donations, you have a lot of companies, these gatekeepers that, you know, you have a lot of nonprofits and we're 501c3. People come in and says, well, you know, I've got X, Y, and Z organizations and they're offering the same thing. So part of our partnership was to find organizations that are doing different things. So when we go to these corporations and then we do our grant writing through our grant writer, we have a holistic approach where you've got 3 different nonprofit organizations trying to address some issues within the community versus just the one. And that seems to be working very well for us. We do also offer, we have a podcast, which is called Hope for the Heart, which is because it's in Elkhart. If you are an advocate, you're an organization, hey, get in contact with Angela, myself, or her brother, Adrian Riley, who's the VP. We would love to have you on for you to be an advocate of your cause, your organization, what you're doing, we do that also. We developed a program called Raise Bike Shop. You know, a lot of people don't have transportation. A lot of people that are coming out for reentry don't have licenses, are not allowed to drive, but they need to get around. So we have volunteers, a couple of young men, we actually pay them 3 times a week. They come in and we take donations from bikes and we get the parts and we rebuild them. So these individuals can come in and we don't charge for the bike. If you need a bike, come see us. We'll give it to you, okay? We try to meet your needs as far as that is concerned. So this is what Ray of Hope is all about. Just really trying to make a difference. This gun violence thing is systemic and it's tied so to these 2 issues here as well and can lead to that if it's not cured or taken care of.
If we look at the suicide and gun violence death rates, they're parallel. Yeah.
I was going to say that was one of the things that as I was looking at that, you're looking at the suicide rate. One of the areas I read, you know, that really concerns me in suicide rates is the number of our veterans committing suicide now. That's up like 30 to 40%. So we've got some work to do, folks. We got some work to do, and it's across the gamut. I mean, from the kids, and you're talking about 8, 9 years old, all the way up.
Yeah, I think so. Do we still have a mic floating around for questions? Does anybody have any questions for the panelists? Lily will bring the microphone over so that everybody can hear.
Hello, my name is Lindsay Monte. I'm mental health liaison for Oaklawn to Goshen schools. And I wondered what your organizations do to partner with local mental health facilities, organizations, providers, and if you can give some examples.
I'm gonna cheat on that one. You're from Oaklawn and Goshen. Angela works for Oaklawn in Goshen, so she's one of the case managers there. Which kind of got her interest spun in that from what she was doing with the certified classes and the sort of things there. So she's already in that arena working with on an individual basis, whether it's there at the facility or visiting people.
We've got a couple of programs ramping up. One is with the local Boys and Girls Clubs, and Taylor is here. Taylor Nicoletti here is working on that partnership, and another that comes to mind is work that we're just starting with Beacon to identify high-risk families very early. Well, let me just say, one would rather be in a situation where we're trying to engage in primary prevention. And once the ideation and attempts have started, we're in the secondary prevention place, and that's not where we want to be. Obviously, we will be there, but and Frank over here is leading that initiative. We had some stuff going on with the local health department, which is how I know Robin, but that I think might be on hold for a bit.
That was so well said. The partnership for a drug-free St. Joseph County for the last 5 years has held a federal drug-free communities grant with the focus on underage drinking and teen marijuana use. So that DFC coordinator has been working with local schools to build youth prevention efforts and groups, that type of thing. We actually just held a youth summit last week where we had about 150 area middle and high schoolers come and spend a couple of hours with us talking about ways they can be ambassadors for substance use prevention, and again, increasing those positive factors and experiences in their life. So that's one way. Another way is through data, which that just sounds boring. Most people are like, oh yeah, you just want their information. But it is really helpful, and we've had to, that's a grant deliverable for us. And then there'll be an additional round of our DFC grant that will come out in April. We'll reapply to keep those groups going. And then we've entered into, I guess, last week we had Jake White, who is a motivational speaker, I guess, for youth, specifically on vaping and marijuana and just living a drug-free life. He does education and engagement through music and interesting games. He was phenomenal with the youth. So we're looking at having him come back and work specifically with some of our higher need schools. And I say higher need ultimately based on the amount of emergency non-fatal overdoses that have happened like within their facilities. So that's exciting. That's one way. And then we're always there for education and prevention. We work really closely with St. Joe Regional Health Systems, Smoke-Free Tobacco Coalition. So ensuring that kids are aware of the dangers of vaping and smoking and that type of thing. So.
I have a question about suicide prevention. So do you know, is there research being done that looks specifically at like what performance culture, that connection with suicide? Because just an observation, I've had the opportunity to be in a few meetings recently with all levels of different types of positions in schools. And I feel like they should be talking about the mental health needs there, but very, very different meetings, but the theme was the same, and that was telling the adults, these are the standards that kids have to meet. And I'm just really burdened by that right now, just feeling like wondering what we're seeing these needs for mental health support for kids, but there's still so much pressure. And I know there's research about like guns and things, but is the research being done about this competitive need to perform and what that does to mental health and suicide?
Which one works? Oh, okay. There is research in that area. It's not something that we are specializing in at the moment. There are other places that do that. But what you've hit on is something that's super important, that there's no one, I don't want to say formula, there's no one trajectory, and that what we need to get our heads wrapped around is how is it that kids from all different walks of life are reaching this point. And so, for example, we've got in the last 20 years, the suicide rate among 10 to 14-year-old girls increased 400%. That's mostly white girls, and at the same time, we've got a 56% increase in the last few years alone among 5 to 12-year-old children of color. And so those are our two highest risk groups, and the psychological state might be the same, but the pathways there are different, and we have to be able to address that.
Right, and I think schools are even the performance, what I'm seeing is the pressure of the adults working in schools to have the students perform is across all demographics also. So
I think what you're really looking at, not be trying to classify this, you got teachers and you got educators. I think there's a differentiation there when you talk about the children, the pressures from home. They may not have a home life, they may be homeless, they may be, some of the kids we've talked to, I can imagine not knowing where my next meal's coming from. You know what I'm saying? They've got the pressures of clothing, how to dress, this whole look. I think that's where the schools went to the uniform, thank God, but it's still in the shoes and the hair and all these sorts of things. And that's where a lot of this manifests itself in what we're seeing from especially the African kids in the neighborhoods. There's a lot of bullying, peer pressure, that is another part of it. I'm trying to face that here with it on a basis. And that's where we get into these things where, we had a shooting over in Elkhart that was involving a 13, 14, 15-year-olds out there like it's the wild, wild west, shooting up the entire neighborhood. Over what? What's that serious? School related.
This is such an amazing panel, and just to be involved with like the community aspect of today, and we're all here, so this is very hopeful. We're talking about really heavy stuff, so I just wanna we're here to make change, and I'm so grateful for you guys. I do wanna just kind of go off of that. I was a school counselor for 2 years, and the parents were actually a huge, I don't know if I would use gatekeeping in that sense, but they were shutting down a lot of our mental health. The social emotional learning was against their values, and so we were always fighting, how do we naturally integrate this suicide prevention? How can we do this in a way that it's just enhancing their lives as children, and not so much like, here's a video on what a suicidal friend might act like or look like. And so I guess my question is, or my thought just to put out there is, how can we as a community really engage these kids in a life that's meaningful and an experience in South Bend, Elkhart, in our community in Goshen? What can we give to them that will more naturally show them that they are important, that they do matter, and that their risk-taking and that their escapism is valid because we see them, versus constantly fighting these people who feel like maybe we're indoctrinating or doing something else.
You on that. Go to the state and tell them to get rid of these standardized tests. And let's go back to basic education, because this is not how I learned.
I learned to think critically, to think through the processes. But right now, our kids are just being given information to put in their brain and put back out. The things that you're talking about are these issues. The parents aren't even sometimes aware, and you've got parents that are in denial. And in the Black community, oh, no, that's not my baby. Yeah, it is your child. But we've got to get involved, and we've got to get past this mentality of a standardized test, folks. It's not working. This is why we've got the suicide rate. This is why we've got the drug addictions and kids dying. You know, that's not the way to do it. I'm 63 years young. I have grandchildren, and I see what they're going through, and I'm like, oh my gosh. You know, it is totally different, and we were given that opportunity to think for ourselves, to have discussions, whether it's in US history or math or Spanish or whatever, you know, to have that discussion. But now it's just so rigid. What are they gonna do? They're not learning anything. That part about the mental, that should be part of the curriculum. Financial literacy should be about that. How many kids even know how to balance a checkbook? Or credit? You know, these are the fundamentals that we got that's no longer there, and then we're wondering why we're having these problems, because once these kids get out in the real world, they weren't taught any of this. And we got babies raising babies. They weren't taught any of this. So this is a perpetual cycle that keeps going, and we've got to find a way to break this cycle. The biggest thing the schools could do, and I see it, is that mandate the parents come in and sign a contract of agreement and performance with the parents and the child involved, and get that curriculum where it makes sense for that child. I'm sorry.
Of course, we also, there's something different about kids' relationship with social media in the United States than in any other country. And that's something that is going to take some creativity on our part. To change that bottom up is I don't think we have answers. I think we have ideas. And implementing them is a whole other story. But I'm gonna have to get a signal block.
Yeah, even like constant, like gratification through YouTube and like online tablets and stuff, yeah.
I think, first of all, thank you, because I totally agree with you. But I think that when you say we have to get creative and we talk about the messaging and the things that the kids are seeing as far as the internet, we lost a part of what I say we as parents, as educators, we lost something that we used to have. We used to be able to turn the TV and you would hear the ink blots and they would be singing about different scriptures, and we would see PSAs about put your seatbelt on, we'd see the crash test dummies about all these things. We had friendly faces and voices that were always singing out and saying, I care about you, you're important, do this, ha ha ha, cute, funny. It was a song you remembered. It was a commercial, it was something that was catchy, there was a jingle, and it went into their heads and it stuck, and you can recall those things right now as an adult. They're not getting that. They're getting those messages and that dopamine shot from TikTok. We're talking to them and we're giving them the words, but we're not giving them that dopamine shot. We're not giving them that serotonin. We're not saying, I love you, I'm cute, you're cute, we're cute. Don't do that, be careful. We're giving them, do this, this is scary, whatever. But they can grab their phone and something is going to give them that dopamine shot that says, oh, this feels good, I need more of this, I need more of this, I need more of this. I do it, I grab my phone for my dopamine shot. I think that we have to be as harmless as a dove, but wise as a serpent. And I think we need to go in the same way with the things that we don't want to go in, right? So if you're gonna use your phone and give yourself that shot, well, I'm gonna be on your phone, I'm gonna say, I love you, and you're not broken. Your surroundings are broken, and you're tripping over it, so let's get this right. Because I think if we change the messaging, they'll be ready to hear us. But they're not ready to hear us, so we're saying, oh. But when we're eye to eye, and we understand where they're coming from because we've been there, I think the message hits more.
I think we program that into their phones, and so with their friends, they open up their phone and you come on. With that message.
Can you hear me? Okay. You were just saying, thinking outside the box, okay? And one of the things is, I'm glad the elephant's out of the room, okay, as far as social media. One thing that might be able to be considered in St. Joe County is approaching educators, the health department, whatever, and saying, okay, how can we incorporate critical thinking skills, not only for the children, but for the parents? And have that maybe as a referendum to utilize that within the school system to begin with, and then bring it on over to mental health. Because the way people, including myself, are influenced nowadays, there's a lot of social media is not helpful whatsoever. So as an educated adult, I'm thinking, okay, what can be done? You asked as far as thinking outside of the box, that's one thing I'm sharing with you right now. Thank you.
To me, social media should be treated as a national emergency, a state of emergency with our children. That's where we're at now, folks. We gotta face this head on, and it ain't gonna get no better. And with the advent of AI, and I don't know if you've been following AI, this artificial intelligence, it is getting freaky scary. Okay, if you've not seen it, if you've not dealt with it, you need to go out there and check it out. If you got kids, grandkids, you need to get on ChatGPT and find out what you can do. And now they have advanced it. One of the cell providers, Google, their new Pixel has AI built into it. Their new phone is gonna have this stuff built into it. We gotta fix some things, folks. We just can't let it keep going and being consumers, because right now we're being led to the slaughter.
I think we have time for a couple more questions.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Angela. Okay, I have a question. Has there been any, I have a lot of questions, but okay, I'm trying to streamline. Okay. Has there been any looking into ACEs, like adverse childhood experience research, and updating that definitely, especially in terms of like demographics, who they're polling, where they're polling, getting information from, and in terms of how to address what's actually going on, because it's more than social media. It's not just that it exists, but it's that it's reflecting what's going on, and that we have more access to what's actually going on. These things have been going on, but now it's more like we're bombarded by it because we have access to everyone suffering worldwide over and over. Also, any looking into restorative justice practices, and expanding them beyond schools. I know South Bend Community Schools are really involved in that, but and I know a lot of social agencies, for example, the agency I work for, St. Margaret's House. I know a lot of the library is going through homelessness training or trauma-informed training, Center for the Homeless, etc. But broadening trauma-informed or restorative justice practices, expanding that into any preventative measures. And I lost my other question. Sorry. And socioeconomic issues. I know you kind of maybe dabbled up against it, but as far as grassroots municipal government practices and legislation, as far as like allocating resources to directly address those things in our community have been cut way back, and it keeps going. So on the adult side of things, how adults can maybe pay attention to who's in power, not just holding the power. It seems to be the people that are holding the power, also the gatekeepers. So they're restricting a lot of resources. So maybe looking into kind of encouraging, looking at what we can do to motivate people around us to pay attention to who holds the power and influence what they're doing with that. That's a lot. There's a lot I'm thinking. I'm sorry.
I would say to everybody concerning this issue,
talking about,
Government, they're not gonna save us. Organizations like right here are grassroots, day-to-day, getting people involved. That's where you're gonna see the biggest difference. There's plenty of grant money, there's corporations that are willing to be philanthropic and help you with these efforts. But as you look at government agencies and look at their budgets, they have almost cut it out completely. You know, when you talk about, there's this big thing before the Black Lives Matter defunding the police, they've already defunded the school systems. Pay attention, folks, that money has disappeared. So it's gonna be incumbent of each community to help and develop and partner with the different organizations. Most of the data and what you're talking about, that information, because I just went into a whole different program. I think part of our challenge is we're not getting real-time data. These are studies that are a year, 2 years behind, so we're not, maybe, doctor, maybe you can address that. But what I see personally, it's like 2020, 2021. So we know we're behind the curve. Those numbers look bad, but where are we at right now? You know, so what's the trend, you know, and how can we get out in front of it? That's what I want to do. I don't want to look back. We know that happened, but how can we get out in front of it?
Yeah, I'm sorry, one thing.
one of the things that we're doing is, one of our primary interventions is collecting real-time phone app data on a secure in-house platform to do exactly that, to figure out what's going on right now. But the question about ACEs is, the answer is yes. I mean, we're focused on that. Many people are focused on that. Our attention has to be there. Frank over here could talk about ACEs all day. Oh, you know each other, okay.
I'm sitting next to his wife. This is his wife. We work together. We're familiar.
Our collaborative relationship with Beacon that we're developing is exactly to focus on ACEs and anything else that will predict early identification so that we can try to be those primary prevention agents. And so all the right names, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, this is probably good. But yeah, I like, for example, a lot of what we're experiencing, eviction rates in St. Joseph County, it's like we average 40 evictions in the county a week now, about. So, I mean, the social sphere where we're working, we're seeing ACEs happen right now. A lot of the direct effects of like mental health issues, substance use and abuse is triggered and stimulated. Like a lot of the causes, socioeconomic disparity, housing is a crisis. So it's trickling down, you know, when you have a child that doesn't know where they're gonna sleep, eat, et cetera. That's, I mean, it's a huge direct cause that we're seeing here in real time in our county. So.
Yeah, no, and I think you drive in a very important point too. Especially when you were looking at the gatekeepers and who hold the power, right? So social drivers of health outcomes, and or social drivers of equity and really anything. When we think about equity in health, right? How do we ensure everyone has access to all the same resources and all the same opportunities? We have to be extremely mindful that the work that needs to take place to address the social drivers and the root causes, the ACEs and the trauma, and building up positive childhood experiences, and ultimately protective factors are critical, and we have to ensure our gatekeepers are well manned and well prepared to take on those folks that may be in power. So ultimately what I'm saying without my Department of Health hat on is civic engagement. Let's get it. That's what happens. Local government, especially when you look at it from a social driver perspective, yes, does not have the ability to get us out of this. but grassroots organization fit with advocacy efforts, and encouragement. And how do we ensure that everyone feels empowered because they matter? That's what I think every day I wake up like, that's my call to action, is how do I ensure that everybody knows they matter and they're important? So then they feel empowered to speak up, to say something. This is just the way it is for my family. This is what's happened for generations, right? And they say today's the day that stops. And yeah, that's deep work, but meet Frank. Everyone meet Frank, he's amazing. And we've been very lucky in our community with looking at adversity or adverse childhood experiences, being very interested in that trauma approach, and ensuring that we really look at those impacts. And I think that's important. And the more we can continue to show the connections and how that really cycles, like I'm always joking with people that everything in public health is a circle, but it's true because everything's connected. And we need to be mindful that all of these things are connected. We have to see the connections and then we have to speak out against them.
We do need to be wrapping up this session here. So I just want to thank the three of you for attending and sharing your expertise and your relationships. We're gonna have a very short break.
So great.
Community collaboration. Our three panelists represent organizations who are developing innovative collaborative approaches to meeting community needs. Each panelist will take a turn describing their initiatives, and then we will open it up to audience questions. So let's get started with some introductions. First, we have Rana Plummer. Rana is the Chief Public Service Officer at the St. Joe County Library. During her many years at the St. Joe County Public Libraries, she has held a variety of positions. Starting out as a shelver, she worked her way through college, eventually getting her master's in library science. Through her varied work experiences, she has become fully immersed in the public library world. Being a librarian means evaluating resources and finding the best ones for the community, as well as pivoting to accommodate the needs of the community. Next, we have Anna Sawatsky. Anna is the director of The Source, Elkhart County's system of care. Anna has worked in a variety of direct service and leadership positions and is passionate about communities working together to create environments where children and families thrive. And then last but not least, we have Jim Baxter. Jim is the Director of Outreach and Engagement and Community Navigator. He is a recipient of Real Services Change Agent of the Year Award. He is working to secure and organize a navigation program to assist residents in the neighborhood around United Way's near Southeast Center. So we'll get started with Rana.
Tyler, thank you for setting this up. First, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the library. We put our vision and mission statement up there, but mostly I wanted to talk about the values. Trust. We uphold the trust that we've earned in our community as a credible source of information and a safe space for the mind and body. That's a really big one. Respect. We treat our community members, staff, and partners with dignity and respect. We recognize the contributions of all and work to create a culture of mutual appreciation. Equity and inclusion, we recognize and honor individual differences, both seen and unseen, as well as shared experiences and needs within our community. Collaboration, that's a really big one with us. We invest in sustained and intentional partnerships to achieve shared goals that increase the impact of education, culture, learning, and our community. Sustainability. We're committed to being outstanding stewards of our human, environmental, physical, digital, and financial resources, balancing our current needs with long-term aspirations. And my favorite one is optimism. We went over a lot of different words for optimism. We thought about joy, fun, happiness, but we finally landed on optimism. We serve our community with a sense of hope and confidence about our future together. And I also wanted to let you know that the main library, the renovated main library, opened on November 21st, 2021. And this building opened January 10th, 2022. And the new spaces here at the Community Learning Center, or as we call it, the CLC, it's transformed our library into a greater hub for the public to gather and meet. The auditorium, the ballroom, and classrooms have made it possible to host large community events and programs like this one. And then I just wanted to show you all of the locations that we have and our hours. We have the main library and 9 locations. And I wanted to ask if anybody has a favorite library branch. Yeah, it's cozy.
That's a good partner too.
That is a really good one. I'm not supposed to have a favorite, but my favorite is LaSalle branch because I like that so many kids come in after school, and I think we're really good protective factors for the kids after school. But don't tell any of my staff that that's my favorite. Here's a list of some of our many services, but a couple that I wanted to point out. Actually, I didn't list it up there, but we went fine-free a couple of years ago, and that has been pretty transformative for people. There were so many people who just thought they couldn't use the library anymore, and now they can. And also, we offer $5 free faxing, scanning, and printing per day with your library card, and that's been really helpful for people applying for assistance. And also, even if you don't have a library card, we will let you print out forms for free if they're for social services or. And a couple of collaborations I wanted to tell you about here at the main library. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna go back to this page for just a second. I also wanted to mention the supportive services resources on our website. There's a list of so many different types of social services that we help people with, such as resources on aging, disabilities, early childhood, education, food, cash, assistance, healthcare, insurance, homelessness, housing assistance, free income tax assistance, at-home learning support, mental health, teen and unemployment information. And then we also have a handout. It's a PDF that lists different types of assistance. And this is something that staff regularly print out for patrons. And it's sort of a homegrown initiative. We have a librarian who's responsible for each subject area. And they make sure all of the links are accurate, the hours, everything is up to date. Okay, now on to some of the main library collaborations. One thing that is coming soon that we're pretty excited about is a community freezer. We're partnering with Cultivate Food Rescue. And the idea is that patrons or anyone will have access to free food here at the main library on the 2nd floor in the Commons. And it promotes food security and fosters a sense of community. It also supports the library's goal to build a stronger community by addressing specific community needs. And the Commons at Main has the space, and it creates a unique opportunity to combine a new service with a trusted partner. And this is kind of a pilot. If it works well, we'll branch out to other branches. TUT is one that we've thought about. Yeah, we're gonna see how it goes. And then another project that we're working on is called SJCPL Compass. Back in July, the library participated in Mural Mania, And Rhiannon Sybil painted that mural on one of our overhead garage doors. And it's a quote from Amanda Gorman, "There is no better compass than compassion." And that's where we got the SJCPL compass name from. The goal with this project is to provide a network of connections to social services at the library, and it aligns with our mission by connecting members of our diverse community to information and resources. It also aligns with our goal to prevent loneliness, and that's something that we're trying to be really intentional about with our services that we offer and looking for ways to build connections. And we do this every day by greeting patrons and getting to know them, but we're trying to do more with that. And we have a designated meeting room set aside for this initiative on the second floor with groups that are listed here that come in weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly. And we're really happy to offer these services. One thing we've learned though is that while some groups like the privacy of the second floor, some would like to be a little more public, like on the first floor, so we're working on that. And by the way, we're always looking for new partners, so let them know if you're interested. And then we have so many great partners. This is just a few of them, so I'm sorry if I missed some. We have so many.
Thank you, Ron. Nope.
We'll leave it at that for now. It's fine.
Great. Let's get a little extra library promo. Right. So, yeah, I'm Anna Swatsky, Elkhart County System of Care Director. We call ourselves the Source. Just today, somebody asked me, what does the source mean? And I thought it was kind of funny when I started, the source of all things. But the founder of this said that when we look at the system of care, so system of care being all of the family and youth serving people in a place, then what she called it the source because it has you are and system of care sort of in there, and she wanted to make it this thing that you are, all of us are the system of care. So I thought that was kind of great. Do I have any Elkhart County people in the room? All right, let's see. And back here, sweet. Okay, there are 3 of us. And sometimes I feel like we are kind of divided. So I will share some things, and it's more toward the end of what do we learn about partnerships from this. They may or may not be directly relevant to you, but to think through what are those themes and what do we learn from them. So I have just 4 kind of specific things that I thought we could talk about. So the first is our Elkhart County Child Data Dashboard. Has anybody heard of this? Lindsay has, a few people. Okay. Okay. So the origin story of this is that early in the COVID pandemic, a group of people through Elkhart County System of Care were getting together. So the community team, we meet every month, and it's DCS and probation and mental health and Boys and Girls Club and all these different people have been meeting for decades to come together around youth mental health outcomes. Somebody shared in that group that the number, she was representing DCS, and she said the number of child abuse reports are way down, like problematically down. We would love to believe that in these new stressful circumstances, child abuse has stopped. We suspect that that is not the case. So it seems like kids aren't in school, these things are not getting reported. What are we gonna do about it? How are we going to find out what's happening with children?
And so the group talked and they said, who is seeing children now? And how do we train them about reporting expectations and reporting protocol? So they were able to get together, they trained bus drivers, people who were delivering meals, others who had contact with children. Reports went back up, so hopefully we were finding out what was happening with children. So that led to a larger discussion of, we had a piece of data, we had information about what was happening with children and we used it to drive action. Are there more pieces of data that we could gather? Which led to a process of looking at who could come together, what data points could we pull together, what would it look like to have a dashboard where we were tracking things that affect children, youth, and families. Through a number of different iterations, we arrived at, and I was not part of this at the time, I get no credit for this, Rebecca Shetler-Fast was my predecessor and she worked with people all over the county and the state to come up with this. So it is now a quarterly updated data dashboard that you can get online that has about 25 risk factors and about 25 protective factors. Some of them are pulled from publicly available information and some are privately gathered. So we have partners who share pieces of information with us. It is on a stoplight system, so green means it's trending in a good direction in the last quarter, red it's trending in a not good direction, and gray it was pretty neutral in that quarter. It's also organized sort of from large social factors all the way to really negative factors that we want to avoid, and again, risk and protective. So this has been, we have 47, I think, partners. And what it means to be a partner is either that you are sharing information or you are attending twice a year data dashboard action meetings. Essentially, it means you've agreed to be part of the solution and not just part of griping about it. So some of the privately shared information, that was sensitive. People didn't want to just share the, probation numbers of kids being detained that month were up, although that is actually public information. So that's not a good example. But there were some sensitive ones. If Boys and Girls Club just had it out there that their attendance was lower that month, would donors see that and say, oh my goodness, what's happening? So they wanted to trust, so it's currently password protected, in other words, so that they can trust that the people who are seeing it are ones who are participating in some way and want to be part of the solution and to use it. So we have twice a year data dashboard action meetings where we look at what are some factors that are trending in a negative direction and come together around those and then form work groups. So currently in August, we had a huge group present and we talked about the problem of chronic absenteeism. Kids are not going to school. This is a national trend. But what we saw in our dashboard is that Elkhart County is way worse than the state average. Like I just looked at it today and it's a bar chart. It's these little Elkhart County, like it's not good. And so we were able to come together as a community. We've been doing some follow-up work. We've met with superintendents. We're kind of forming either a work group or several work groups to see, are there things that we as a community can do to support schools? And kind of the consensus around it was, we've put this on schools and then on probation. And those are the two people that we expect to deal with this. And so what's happening in between and what are we gonna do to support families and youth with all of the various barriers and things going on? That's one of our projects. Maybe I'll just mention, another one is my colleague Xinyi Tan is very invested in early childhood mental health. This is her specialization, this is what she does. And she was alarmed by a study, I think it came out of Yale a while ago, that said that preschool expulsion rates are the highest of any grade up through 12. And that this is concerning and has all of these knock-on effects, including what they were calling the preschool to prison pipeline, that these things start very early. And so some of those factors, as she looked into it, were, there were fewer legal supports for families in preschool, and that there were also, fewer legal protections, fewer supports coming. They don't have paraprofessionals and IPs and all of this stuff. And that then also a lot of it was that nobody was ill-intentioned, but that schools couldn't keep other children safe. They didn't have the resources, they didn't have the knowledge, they didn't know how to care for this child who's having these behavioral issues in the midst of everything else they had to do, and so they were expelling them. And so she developed a model that she calls Together We Rock, which is, the rock is like reaching out to connect kids. Yes, that's it. And so there are several components of that. One of them is a monthly multidisciplinary staffing. So anybody in any of these preschools or early childhood centers can ask to come to this and bring a case that they are struggling with, and have a speech pathologist and an occupational therapist and a physical therapist and teachers and triple P parenting professionals who will gather around and try to give them perspective, solutions, walk through it, bring that trauma-informed lens to it. Oftentimes the providers are just so up to here by the time they come that just sort of that backing down and saying, what do you think is really happening for this child? What is happening for this family? Are there cultural things that that you haven't paid attention to that might be happening here? What are other factors? And then coming up with solutions. She also then has a cohort of a model where preschool or early childhood providers can sign up to be part of a 10-week cohort where they learn conscious discipline and get into peer groups and work together to learn some skills. And then a third one I'll mention is currently we're working with the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative and Elkhart County Court Services on applying. We just got one grant to start a youth mobile crisis unit where we will be able, so actually you guys are ahead through Oakland on the adult version of this, where you can, when a person is having a mental health or substance use issue, we can sometimes prevent use of law enforcement and hospitalization by having this team mobilize and go and meet with that person and work through what's going on. The youth version that we'll be starting in Elkhart County works a little differently in several ways. One is that we go to every single family who calls. This hasn't started yet. We will go to every single family who calls. We're trying to get people out of what we professionals have already trained them into, which is say, sorry, you can't get help until they're actually suicidal or until they've actually punched you or until, so we're trying to say every single time you call, we're hoping you call with a little crisis so that we can go meet with you, come up with a safety plan, work through the immediate issues. And then the other difference with the youth is that we provide ongoing stabilization services where it'll be 1 to 6 months of working through whatever that family needs, connecting them to whatever community resources they need. Do they need mental health? Do they need after school care? Do they need daycare? Do they need food resources? What is it that they need? So we're working on that, and now we're working on another sort of diversionary process. What we're hearing in Elkhart County, and again, this mimics other places, is that we have kids who end up getting detained for lack of other community resources to send them to, and probation is very, very concerned about this. And so we're on Monday applying for a grant to work with them, and more on that. Yeah, I won't get into the themes now because we'll have time to talk after, so thank you.
All right, here with the speaker. Hi, everyone. You can hear me? Yeah, we're good. Okay, great. Hi, I'm Jim Baxter. I work with United Way of St. Joseph County. And in particular, we're here to talk today about our new one roof Southeast Neighborhood Center and how that came to be, which was simply an idea of Mayor Pete. Remember Mayor Pete? Always gets a smile. Mayor Pete had the notion that city services that are widely available don't need to be concentrated downtown in the county city building. They need to be out in neighborhoods. And that, the story is, and if I'm a communication major, so if the truth don't work, sometimes I make stuff up. So take this with a certain grain of salt. The story is that he ran into Laura Jensen, our former CEO, and she had just been to a similar center in California, the Magnolia Center. And so she said, I think this might work. This is all happening 6 years ago, pre-COVID, but these conversations are happening. So the goal is fairly simple, it's to get a multitude of services that we have available in this county and in this city to the place where people who need them so that they can be connected. And of course, so that we can communicate with them. I see having a background in communications, I still teach it at Notre Dame occasionally. I see most problems that we've heard here today as communication problems. So that's probably simplifying it way too much, but this is one way that we can work through that by creating a space. So the place is important. And we chose the Southeast neighborhood. If you're familiar with South Bend, we are at the corner of DeVale and Fellows. We're sandwiched between the Boys and Girls Club, Ivy Tech, Riley High School. The beauty of that neighborhood, census tracts 29 and 30, zip code 13, is that they were already had a community-wide organization. They had the Southeast Organized Area Residents that had been meeting for years. So when we decided that we wanted to build a building, we had a place to go for advice. And we still use that group, they met last night, for advice to inform us of what do you want? We've got $7.9 million, we've got 2 lots now that the city gave us. We're gonna build something, what should we build? So at that time, the first request was childcare. Quality childcare. So over half of our facility is a childcare center, which is being operated by El Campino. Shortly behind that came mental health services. So we've worked with Oakland, we've invited Bauer Center as an office there to do some of their skills coaching with their children. And then we branched out. We want senior services. Real services, there are some people from Real Services here today, but I don't think they're in the room, have done an amazing job. We have lunch every day for seniors, where they not only eat, but they converse. It starts at 10:30, the food doesn't start till 11:30. We have classes meeting at our center from Riley High School. 2 classes come down periodically, not every week. But the beauty of that is that they sometimes talk to the people who are eating lunch, the seniors. What a wonderful intergenerational way to communicate. We also are working very closely with our veteran population. There are 72 veterans we've identified in our zip code. Most of us here knows the struggles that veterans face, and a lot of that is based on communication. So we're just having coffee once a month. Just come visit, talk to. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're not trying to offer any suggestions, services. Just come and get to know one another. And along the way, we can help you with any kind of services in the city, because we have taken the time prior to opening the building. We took the time to enter information into our computer system so that we can make those connections, which are so important. For example, right now, Christ Child Society has a great family or a great child clothing program, but they ask for referrals. So we have the forms, we can do the referrals. We don't want you running all over town trying to get clothes for your kids. So we have the ability to do that kind of thing, and we know there are plenty of assets in St. Joe County that we can connect. The story that resonates with me now that we're in place, we've been open, the service side of our facility has been open since December, and you're welcome to stop by the way. Anybody can walk in. We don't check your zip codes at the door. We preference it if you're serving people in our zip code, but we don't care. And then the childcare side opened last August. So we've been open less than a year, and this is the first. This is a project of United Way. It's a separate LCC for legal reasons that I don't understand. It is the first of 4. The next one will probably be in Mishawaka. There will be one in the northwest side of South Bend and one in Washington. So this is the time to get it right for us. The time to see what's going on, what really works and what doesn't work. We have a living room area, a cozy area that people can be comfortable. We have free Wi-Fi, free coffee, free printing for people who need those services, and they can come and just join us. Free computer lab, by the way. But what I want to get to is how this all works together very nicely. And I was sitting at my desk, which is right out in front, last couple of weeks ago. There was a young man that came in from Riley and was just working with his computer. we close at 5, that may be changed, but right now we're closing at 5, and I said, can you wrap it up? We have to, I'll give you some time, we gotta go. He said, do you have any crackers? Or anything to eat? And that was the trigger. Because we do have a little bit of food, we're not stocked, we support Broadway Christian Parish's food pantry. But, so we have a little bit of food, but that gave me the opportunity to talk to him about what's going on food-wise in his home. And the magic of St. Joe County, folks, is that through United Way's project with DoorDash, that family had food the next day. So here's a young man who comes in just expecting to do homework. And we end up supporting his family with food delivery the next day. And of course, as you all know, there are probably a myriad other issues going on with the family, but it gave us the opportunity to impact by maintaining contact with that individual. The other story I want to share with you, because I think it impacts a lot of the work that we're doing here, what we've been talking about, is we had one of our real services clients said that one of the real services folks who works with us came out and said, I just talked to a mom who, I just talked to a daughter whose mom accessed our services 20 years ago. And while that's a good thing, there's something wrong. And that's where I did a little research and decided to use the word disrupt. We have to disrupt the system that we have built. And that's, I think, all the things Dr. Bryant was talking about, we've heard a lot about today. So if we can do that, to the extent that we can do that by providing a place, by providing a connection, we will continue to do that. So I hope we're doing, we're measuring, we're doing our proper data research, we're working with, hopefully working with the source to get some way to track that. So hopefully we will be able to measure our success very quickly, because as you know, United Way is based on grants and donations, and more, as is fair, our donors want to know what we're doing right. Are we doing a good job? What are we doing with the money? That's a fair question. So that's the One Roof Southeast Center story. I hope you all will take the opportunity. You can't miss it. It's a brand new building. It's on the corner of DuBelle and Fellows. We'd love to have you. We'd love to talk to any of you. I've got my cards out in the main area out there to speak after. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to each of our panelists for sharing the important work that your organizations are doing in our community. And now I'd like to open it up to all of you for questions. I believe, is this mic gonna roam about? And just raise your hand and Justin will bring you the mic.
Thank you. I just had one question, and it is, when do you anticipate down the road that the other centers will open? Any ballpark?
Well, that's tough in this environment, but we have, we're in the process of getting downtown City Hall in Mishawaka. I don't know how public that is, so please don't tell me. I'm not supposed to say that. But then, and interestingly, the next one was planned to be Northwest, but Northwest, as we began, and we got the property. As we began to build and do some early testing, we discovered it was on a previous landfill. And landfills are something that apparently I'm just learning, you don't want to try to fix a landfill. So we're looking for an alternative site there. Walkerton's in place. So to answer your question, I think the next one will be Mishawaka. I think. That's just.
And then my other question would be, is the funding permanent? And is in place?
It's sustainable. The model is sustainable because we do have folks in the building who pay rent. The WIG program from Beacon Health System pays rent. Bauer pays rent. Family and Children's Center pays rent. The child care pays rent to support not only the overhead, but the ongoing operation. So yes, there is, it's not going to be a burden on society or on our donors forever. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maria Garasi and I have a private practice and do solution focused work. And so one of the frameworks that I approach my client work is when we're looking at a current problem, sometimes it helps to look how we've solved this problem in other areas in the past. And starting from Dr. Bryant's hourglass image with the gatekeepers playing that prominent role. And I kind of chuckled when Lisa asked her a question of how as communities do we open up that middle part of the hourglass? Because Lisa knows the answer because she's done it. You bypass the gatekeepers. And you may know that Lisa spearheaded the pro bono counseling program where, you know, I know it's not just you, Lisa. I know you've brought a lot of people in, but it starts often with the vision of one person saying, people need mental health services and they're not getting it. So you know what? We're just gonna give it to them. We're gonna bypass all the gatekeepers. I heard Mr. Sutton say it with the ray of hope. You need to get somewhere? I got a bike. Here's a bike. Ms. Plummer said it with the cultivate. You need food, or you said it, Mr. Baxter, you need crackers? We got food. Just this whole model of, you know, let's bypass the gatekeepers, find a person with a vision and the understanding of a community. What do you need? I know someone who has it. Here you go. I feel like that whole model has great potential for so many problems. And it's kind of sad to say because it's so much work. You know, it could be more systemic, it could be on a larger scale, but maybe this is the way, is it starts with just knowing what a community needs and just giving it to them so that they can be successful. Anyways, it's inspiring to hear all the stories of people saying, what do you need? Here, I have someone who has it. Here you go. Thank you, everyone.
That will vary. Every person that comes through our door has a different story. They rotate around some constant things, but we're all unique. And so our approach is just to help be a voice.
My question about
challenges, and if there's been an obstacle or a barrier that you've had to overcome in collaborating with other agencies that we could learn from as we seek to do better collaboration like you all are doing?
I think tying these two questions together is the problem are when somebody is caught in the system, when there is no bypassing, when they're a juvenile who's being detained, who's caught doing something. And so I think challenges from my end are when, you know, we consider ourselves doing systems work. How are we fixing is a bad word, but I don't know what else to use. But how are we working with the systems that children and youth are caught up in? If DCS gets called, you have to be able to deal with that. And so we have to improve that situation for families. And so challenges are things that are, so for example, what we're working on with juvenile probation right now is that what probation is saying is we have to use the state system. We have a youth who gets arrested and we have to get into the state system, and we don't want to detain them, we want to provide them community services. So we get into the system and we go through all these screens and put in all of their information, and then we get a drop down with what service standard do we want. So we choose truancy termination is one that they work with families to try to figure out what's going on and get kids back in school. So we choose that one, and then we get a drop down with everybody who's providing it. So we put in a referral. Then we find out that agency doesn't really work, doesn't really exist. So then we come back to the drawing board and we do it all over again, and we put in a referral, and then we find out, well, they thought they could take it, but now they're short-staffed. And so that system from the state level will not change. You know, yes, we can go advocate, we can do all of these things. So it's this knowing, where do we create these local solutions? So that's one where we are working in our grant proposal, is to create a locally available, up-to-date sort of thing where they can know who actually is providing services, do they have availability, and make those referrals so that we can get services when youth and families need them. So that's a challenge, is there's so many layers to the barriers that people are facing, and when are we tweaking things and providing local solutions? When are we going advocating at the state? When are we, yeah, it's constant.
I can talk about one of the challenges with the community freezer. It was approved and good to go in June, but there's a lot of behind the scenes paperwork that takes a while. So I ordered the freezer, the microwave, the cabinet, all the supplies, and now I'm just waiting for the MOUs to be approved. So that's a little challenging.
Yeah, similar to that, our challenge with El Campito is getting improvements from the state to move, because as you all know, they're on the west side now. We're ready to go, the building's ready to go, it's been fully inspected, it's getting improvements, so there is paperwork is gonna be a challenge. And in our case, one of the things that I've observed is that it's often hard for some people, to approach something new. Our building is big and fancy, it's well lit, it's beautiful, very practical, and it's not ostentatious, but it is new. I've talked to neighbors who watched it go up and didn't bother to find out what was inside. They never stopped and said, what are you building here, or anything like that. So I think in our case, newness is getting people comfortable in there. I talked with Juan Constantino at La Casa, and he said that their new building on South Michigan sat virtually empty for almost a year because he couldn't get anybody to understand what they were doing and get them comfortable. There's a comfort. I mean, so we're patient. We're doing better than that, but we're patient, and it is frustrating when I know I can help you, and you're not coming to me. So it's a challenge. We keep promoting ourselves. We keep getting the word out. We work with local organizations. It's a challenge.
Frustrated when we're working on this big collaborative project, and then you find out some Lone Ranger out there is starting something very similar, which is fine. There are enough problems to go around, but if we could have just had a conversation and figured out how we could all come together, this could have been so much more efficient and effective and better. And yeah, that can be a challenge.
While I'm waiting for the mic, I'm gonna do a quick little plug. Thank you so much for the project. Justin's another one of our volunteers. So you all talked a little bit about the different partners that you work with. If an organization was interested in partnering with you, how do these collaborations start? How do organizations approach you? Are you open to new people? How does that all work?
Coffee in the morning, my card's out in the lobby. So yes, we'll talk. I'll talk to you. I would love to talk, because many, it doesn't have to be about coming to our building. I mean, let's just talk, because we need to get those connections. And we're really good at getting those connections when we have to. And I've lived here a long time, but I don't know everything. I don't know everybody. So please, come answer me. That's how you got it. Just call us. Yeah.
But same for me, but let's do tea, not coffee.
Yeah, similar. I feel like we have tons of love. Yesterday I was at City of Elkhart talking with LaShawn Brooks, who one of her interests is housing and IHCDA and Oaklawn. And from my perspective, I'm interested in it because it's a social driver of health, and if kids don't have places to live, their mental health won't be great. And so that was just one of these things that just bubbled up from this person's interested, and we have these different conversations, and all of a sudden there are four of us, meeting in Elkhart and coming up with some really practical things. So I think part of it is just paying attention and being aware to what are people's interests and then pulling them together. And sometimes I'll pull people together, I'm not even involved, just say you and you, we're all talking about this. Why don't you get together? So I think being aware and noticing what people are doing and where we can connect them is, yeah, just talking.
Question.
So you had said something about when someone is coming in and they're doing kind of like similar to what you're doing, and like if they could have just came, you guys had a conversation. So do you reach out to them for you to, how does that look for you?
Yeah, so I had a good example of this recently where I found out that there were 2 other agencies that were looking at dashboards. I thought, okay, I had to slow down for a minute, not do anything for 24 hours, because I thought, what are we doing? Why would we do this when we have this? Why couldn't we come together? But in reaching out to both of them and talking, I think now we're at the point where, you know, we had great conversations. It looks like we might be able to do this together and it will be better for everybody. So yeah, and sometimes it's not that anybody wanted to do anything bad, it's just sometimes you just don't even know or don't think about what that could have been. So yeah, I think not getting upset by it, but actually just reaching out and saying, hey, can we work together? Best.
Well, thank you all so much for coming here and sharing your time. Last panel will be starting in just a moment. Thank you.
Mental health awareness. I'll be moderating our final panel on advocating for good mental health policy. Our 3 panelists are elected officials and advocates who have worked to promote good mental health policies on the state and local level. Each panelist will take a turn describing their efforts, and then we'll open it up to audience questions. There's a microphone to my right on the floor that audience members can use to ask questions. And I'm very, very proud of Cynthia and her master's nonprofit business administration from the University of Notre Dame, and has spent over 20 years in nonprofit administration, with the last 10 within higher ed. Rebecca's passionate about community engagement and interfaith collaboration. She serves on the board of several local nonprofits, particularly those that focus on mental health resources and access, trauma-informed practices, urban development, and chronic homelessness. Welcome. Next, we have State Representative Maureen Bauer. Representative Bauer was born and raised in South Bend. She's a graduate of John Adams, go Eagles, and Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, IUPUI. Maureen is committed to supporting our public school teachers and students. She's currently serving on the Indiana University South Bend Advisory Board. Her current legislative work at the Indiana House of Representatives includes serving as a ranking minority member of the Agriculture and Rural Development Committee and as a member of the Judiciary Committee, as well as the Environmental Affairs Committee. Representative Bauer is currently the co-chair of the Indiana General Assembly's Rural Caucus. Maureen is the 2022 Indiana State Lead of the National Conference of Environmental Legislators, NCEL. Welcome and thank you. And we have Councilman Perez Jr. Councilman Perez has served on the Goshen Common Council for almost 4 years. During his council term, he has worked to establish stronger communication with youth constituents by supporting the Youth Caucus leaders and has supported initiatives on the Goshen Common Council that address mental health interventions in the community. From 1998 to 2012, Councilman Perez served as a behavioral health therapist in Puerto Rico and in Noble and LaGrange County. That is a span. He is author of a mental health promotion curriculum for Latinx immigrants. Councilman Perez also serves as the Vice President for Student Life, Hispanic Serving Initiatives, and Dean of Students at Goshen College. He serves as the board chair for Mennonite Central Committee, US, a global human relief organization that focuses on human relief, development, and peace. Councilman Perez holds a Master of Social Work and a doctorate in educational leadership. Thank you and welcome. So Rebecca, would you like to get us started?
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. I hope you're doing well, even though it's kind of gloomy outside. I will just say I was very sorry to miss so much of today's sessions, but I have a sick 12-year-old at home, so we've had a little roughness going on there. I just wanted to talk about working on advocacy from a very personal, local level. I'm not a legislator and I don't have a lot of formal training, but I feel like I've been doing this for a few years now and I can give some reflections on what we've done and what I plan to do and how we'll work moving forward. And I will say right off that I don't do this alone, I do this with other folks. So my work on this started around probably 2016 is when I had a personal situation with a family member who had a mental health crisis. And rather than going into a mental health facility, he was taken to jail. And that exacerbated the situation pretty significantly. And that's when I started going, something is wrong. Like, is this the situation? We're pretty well resourced, we're pretty fortunate in a lot of ways. But if this is the way we treat people who have a mental illness, something's wrong with the system. So I started having conversations with folks in town, and at the time I worked at a different higher ed organization, and part of my job was to meet with community partners. So I met with somebody at the health department and said, what are you doing about mental health? And they said, not a lot. You know, it's like on our list of things along with vaccinations and, you know, inspecting restaurants, but we don't have anybody who solely is working on this. I talked to Beacon Community Health, Beacon Community Impact, and I said, what are you doing about mental health? And they said, not a lot. And so I found myself frustrated as a human going, I've noticed this, other people must notice this, but who's working on this, because there's a problem. It wasn't until I had a conversation in 2019, so you'll say this is kind of a journey, with Andre Stoner, who is the paid community organizer for Faith in Indiana, where I said, what are you guys doing about this? And I shared my story, and I said, you said that you're interested in health or healing instead of incarceration. I can't remember how they put it. I said, are you working on this? And he was like, well, we're not specifically working on mental health, but we are working on incarceration, or decreasing the number of people who are incarcerated. And you should join this work. And I said, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. And then the pandemic happened. And so very little happened in 2019 and 2020. Around the early part of 2021, he reached out to me and he said, hey, I know we haven't talked in a while, but some work has been done and I wanted to invite you to these conversations. And I was like, cool, what are they? And he said, there's a group meeting and it's called TIROSC. And I said, what is that? And he said, it's the Trauma-Informed Response-Oriented System of Care. And it's convened by Oaklawn, but it has stakeholders from probation and the sheriff's department and all these other groups in South Bend. And they're talking about the intersection of mental health and incarceration. And I said, this sounds amazing. Yeah, I'm game. And what was really nice at that time, at least for me, was all the meetings were held over Zoom. So I wasn't trying to run around town to different meetings. I was at my desk and I was just turning on, you know, my computer and pointing in the right direction. And at the time, those groups of people were just trying to figure out who was doing what and to start thinking about what are other ways to approach a problem that everybody could see and found frustrating, but nobody was doing anything it felt like about it. And so we were engaged in what we call research actions. And those are literally meetings. And we would meet over Zoom with partners in other parts of the United States who seem to be doing it better or differently than us. And it wasn't long before we met with some folks in Tucson, Arizona, who said, we have something called the Crisis Response Center, and we've actually developed a whole system of responding to crises that's different than kind of what you seem to be doing in South Bend. First of all, we have, you know, a mobile crisis response team that's going to these crises in lieu of police or with the police. And secondly, if somebody does need to go someplace, we have a specific center designated for them to go, called a Crisis Response Center. And we left that call, or that Zoom, and I remember a few things, but one of the things that was said was, you know, Sheriff Redmond, what do you think? And he said, we needed this yesterday. Like, we absolutely need to do this. Why aren't we doing this kind of? And so there was a recognition in that meeting that like, this could be it. But just because you have a great idea and everybody on the Zoom call agrees with it doesn't mean that you're gonna get what you want. And so that's when we started looking at sort of the political factors going on. And at that time, we knew a lot of money was coming into our community through the American Rescue Plan funding, like millions of dollars. I think it was $63 million for our county as a whole if you added South Bend, Mishawaka, and the county. And so we were like, we should get some of that. But how do we get everybody at the table to agree that we need to use some of this money for this specific purpose? So that's when we started doing even more research actions. We started meeting with county council members, county commissioners, the sheriff's department, the head of the youth, youth justice system, and others to say, you know, we've seen this system, and we had, I can't even tell you, there were a couple times where I looked at my calendar and I had like 10 of these meetings in a week. Thank God I had very gracious boss at the time. And we started sort of getting people on board. And then we had what's called a public action. So those were all sort of behind the scenes, their research actions. We had a public action in May of that year to say, this is what we as a community have decided we want. And at that, we had a couple hundred people. And so it was at that public action that we pulled up County Commissioner Andy Castelny, the head of the health department, Bob Einters, Lori Nossinger from Oaklawn, and the sheriff, and said, do you agree, will you say publicly in front of 300 people that this is a priority? And they said yes. And because of that, then we had sort of the momentum to start going to the county council and the county commissioners and saying, we want this money. So that was like that. Oh dear, I'm not going fast enough. At the same time, we recognized this was just our community, and this was one-time funding, and that wasn't going to get us through like the years afterwards. So we started looking at the state, and we started talking with some of our state legislators. So we did the same exact thing. We did research actions with with Dvorak, Devon, Mishler, trying to remember who else, maybe Bauer, Linda Rogers, and said, what are you doing at the state? We're gonna need money that makes us sustainable. And we found out that they commissioned, Mike Kreider had commissioned to have a public behavioral health commission look at this problem on a state level, and that we were awaiting a report. And that report came out in October of 2022. And they said, yeah, we also see this as a problem. We see there as a 3-step solution, a number to call, people to come, a mobile crisis unit, and a place to go, a crisis response center. So we need to set that up, not just in South Bend, Indiana, but throughout the state of Indiana. And we need to establish a regular funding stream to fund this. So for a while there, long story short, we were fighting on both levels. We were doing the local level fight to get the funding, and we started the fight on the state level. And the nice thing about Faith in Indiana is it's not just a South Bend thing. We have groups in Marion, Indiana, and Northwest Indiana, and Fort Wayne. And we started collaborating with Mental Health America and other organizations. So it wasn't just us, but we recognized that funding in the South Bend area was important, but it wasn't gonna last us. And so we needed to do that. So yeah, I personally went down to Indianapolis only one time. A lot of other Faith in Indiana folks went down many more times than that. And the good news is that in April, they passed $100 million for Senate Bill 1, which is Behavioral Health Matters, and put in some structures that will help create ongoing funding streams for this moving forward. What I would say, just as a few last thoughts, is that I've learned is, you know, sort of humility is my favorite thing. I go in and I like to learn, and I like to ask questions, but I'm also really stubborn and kind of annoying in that when somebody says, well, we just can't do that because that's not the way we've done that, I'm not afraid to say why, you know. Our conversation with Dvorak, who's Democrat from up here, was extremely disappointing, I'll be quite honest. He was basically like, oh, well, we have no power, so we're not gonna do much. And it was like, you're supposed to be one of the good guys, come on, man. Other people were at least kind of willing to have the conversation. And as soon as we made it personal, like as soon as we said, like, do you know anybody in your family who struggled with substance use disorder or mental health? They were able to sort of make the connection. The other thing is that I have kind of learned a lot just about the systems, both the local system, county and city politics that I probably didn't want to know, and the state. But that doesn't come without doing some homework. You know, I read the news pretty regularly. I attend meetings just for fun. Really luckily, a lot of meetings, county council, health department, county city council, all of those things now are done over Zoom or available for Zoom. So even if I can't make public comments, I'm aware of what's going on. And then I started just asking questions and not being okay with like we're not dealing with this because it just seems too complex or too hard, or people aren't willing to work. I don't take no for an answer. So I would suggest that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca, for your work on these very important issues. I did meet with Faith in Indiana at the State House, and we appreciate you putting the pressure on the legislature and at the local level. But my name is Bauer, State Representative here in Downtown South Bend, and 3 precincts in Mishawaka, serving my 2nd term as state representative. And in those first few years in office, we have seen incredible investments in public health and in mental health, historic investments. In fact, I voted for the budget in my first year in office, which is unthinkable for a member of the minority party, but we had this federal funding that we were able to invest in these programs, and after a global pandemic, recognize the importance of healthy communities. And so some of the history of the legislation will just go back to 2021. Indiana Justice Loretta Rush stated in her State of the Judiciary, her recognition for investing in mental health. She believes that the 988 hotline, which please share this with friends and families, it will be life-changing. She believes that this is the future of crisis care and crisis response. And that number went live in July of 2022. And we're still looking to get that public information out and promote it. And the state does have funding to put up billboards like I see in Michigan, and yard signs, and hopefully we can just get that word out and reverse some of the trends that we're seeing in mental health and suicide and addiction. But also in 2021, the governor created a public health commission. And that was also a result of the pandemic, to look at what we're investing in, where we need to invest. And they recommended that we needed $240 million to improve Indiana's public health system. In 2022, we were 35th in the nation in overall health, 42nd in mental health. And we know that healthcare policy directly impacts mental health. There are these social determinants of health that you probably heard about all day today. And when we talk about access to food and shelter and healthcare, that all determines your quality of life. So those are very important issues as we're talking about this. In 2022, or back to 2021, we did have some successes as well. We were able to expand Medicaid 1 year postpartum for pregnant women. We're one of the few states in the nation that hadn't done that. People have been fighting for a very long time to do that. So able to do that my first year, vote for that, and it was incredible, will save lives. Indiana has also had the 3rd highest maternal mortality rate in the nation, and it does impact Black women and women of color at higher rates. So we're talking about these predictors of health. We know where we can invest money and make a difference. We also banned the shackling of pregnant incarcerated women. Kelly and I talked about this, and I'm telling folks, it was happening. Women were incarcerated, pregnant, and put back into handcuffs after delivering. It's hard to believe that it was going on for so long until 2021. So that is no longer possible, no longer happening in Indiana. And then in 2021, we also passed legislation that creates local criminal justice stakeholder groups to impose public safety and create community well-being. So we're looking at this again with justice rush, criminal justice reform, again, treatment instead of handcuffs. And I'll tell you, it used to be a one party promoting these things, but now we're looking at it, collaborative effort, and it is no longer a partisan issue when we're talking about these things. I truly believe that. Again, going on what we accomplished this year, my good friend, Representative Victoria Garcia Wilburn, passed a bill in her first term in office that provides law enforcement training board to establish annual mental health and wellness training for first responders like police and fire. When you talk to our first responders, the trauma that they see, especially when you're responding to these life and death situations, when you see the child gunshot victim, that type of trauma stays with you. And I learned something called cumulative trauma. So it builds up over time. And maybe you aren't seeking treatment after an incident, but it does continue to build up on you. And so suicide rates among law enforcement and first responders is quite high. So we're going to address that particular group of individuals. And it'll take some time to set that up, but that's something to look forward to address and take care of those who are protecting and serving us. And then also going back to investing in health, we also recognize a gap in our care system where a legal permanent resident had to wait 5 years before she, as a pregnant woman or her child, could get access to Medicaid. And we were able to waive that. So legal permanent residents who are pregnant or are children no longer have to wait 5 years before they can have access to Medicaid and health coverage. If you're pregnant, you will be going to the doctor before 5 years. So really happy to see that barrier to health being broken down. This year, I do have a handout if you want to pass it out, but and you can do it at the end, but I'm highlighting, it doesn't matter, whatever you'd like to do if you want to follow along. But there are 3 bills I wanted to highlight that were really focused on investing in mental health. First is Senate Bill 1, which Rebecca talked about, and it helps deliver more resources to community mental health centers. It does set up the 988 hotline in the state, and in the budget, they funded $100 million. Now, it is anticipated that once fully up and running, the program will cost $130 million to run, so we do need more funding. There is going to be an additional line item for this program in the next year, and so if we can prove it's working, if we can build our case that this is making a difference, I think we can get the funding attached to that. It is only a third of the funding which the governor's Indiana Behavioral Health Commission asked for. They asked for $260 million and we only got $100 million. This law also, and then the next law I wanted to highlight was House Enrolled Act 1006. So this law states that law enforcement can divert people with mental health challenges away from jail and to treatment. And we were able to put $10 million in the budget for that program. And the law provides guidelines for people currently in jail to be transferred to a mental health facility with approval from a judge. The new law also aims to improve access to emergency detention services for people suffering from mental health issues by ensuring hospital costs are covered. So I see that as a really transformative investment in how we treat mental health in the state of Indiana. And that was introduced by a Republican who I serve on the Judiciary Committee with, who really takes a lot of time to invest. He also passed the same Bill 1006 right after the pandemic, which bans the use of a chokehold or defines it as a deadly force. And that was really transformative for our criminal justice system in the state. And then finally, Senate Bill 4, which you might be a little more familiar with too, because it has a local health department opt-in associated with it. It is a bill that was proposed by the Public Health Commission. Former Senator Luke Henley and Dr. Vox presented this before the legislature. Provides funding to local health departments. It empowers the health departments to invest in these social determinants of health, these drivers of community health. 86 of the 92 counties opted in. So there were 6 counties that did not want to take this funding, and I would be pretty upset if I lived in one of those 6 counties. The things that this money can be used for includes things like food protection, and access to healthy food. It invests in pools inspections and in community health initiatives. It will help with child and adult immunizations, tobacco and vaping prevention, cessation, maternal and child health, a number of things that can be invested to make a difference in the future of children and those who choose to live here in the state of Indiana. So a lot of those issues that I hear about in changing reforming how we invest in mental health and healthcare in general, and diverting people away from criminal justice system. We hear you. I think it's important to show up. And I hope every single one of you in this room does vote, because when you talk about these issues, it's directly related to the people who are sitting in those chairs and making those decisions for you. So with that, I will.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure I need to say anything else, because they've said it so well. But thank you, Rebecca, for that work you're doing. Big in the eye. I know Andre quite well, and so it's great to know. Okay. We'll send him an email. What happened, Andre? Where are you? And also, Secretary Bauer, appreciate the work. Having been following the last 3 bills that she talked about, which was SB 1, HB 106, and SB 4. Each one of those has tremendous impact at the state level, but it translates into local connection. Myself serving on a 988 subcommittee at the state level for how does this line 988 actually, how do we make it that it's accessible to people of color and people who may not trust systems and may not feel comfortable with calling a line, right? So how do we work that? How do we make it happen? So there's good work happening in our state around that. So thank you. And also thank you to the organizers of this event. You know, it takes a lot of work. I myself, a number of years ago when I was a therapist, organized a Latino Behavioral Health Summit in Northeast Indiana, because that's kind of where I chose to, when I moved here from Puerto Rico. I'm not Puerto Rican, grew up in South Texas, but I lived in Puerto Rico for a number of years. And I really believe in the rural community. And so we opened up the space in a rural community to think about Latino behavioral health and how we actually support individuals who may not be comfortable with entering a particular system. So thank you so much for that work of just bringing people together, and to all of you. They've said a lot, so I can just give the thank yous. You know, I might say a couple of things, but I might say a couple of things. Just thank you for the work there. I myself, I'm in my 4th year of being a Goshen City Councilman, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed that particular role. It has given me an opportunity to really enter into conversations with constituents and residents who live in District 5, which is the southern part of Goshen. And it's really created opportunities to think about how we support young people, because good mental health policy, the main purpose that we write, that anyone would write mental health policy, is to ensure that individuals are impacted positively in the way they
And so creating good mental health policy is really all about increasing access to services. So all of the things that our state legislators are doing, who voted for this, the counties who have accepted this funding, they're really doing it because they want to ensure that we as residents, we as citizens in our communities, we have better access. And so access to services. When I was a behavioral health therapist, we really looked at how we can increase access to mental health services to the Latino Latinx community at that point. And we found that it was difficult to engage people in that work because the system itself was not conducive to those conversations. And so that meant we needed to be in different spaces for that. And the way that good mental health policy impacts individuals is that number one, it reduces stigma. And a good mental health policy will also it will prevent and act early. So we need to impact people. And so that's why our legislators and Faith in Indiana, they want to get to people early. So therefore we can prevent a crisis. Having myself been in an emergency room many times, working with a person who is in crisis, you have to wonder what was happening prior to them arriving at the emergency room for mental health support. The other thing that good mental health policy can do is that it strengthens our crisis response. So this particular, I think it's legislator Bauer said, HB 1006, that speaks directly to crisis centers, that we can get more support to individuals who are experiencing a crisis. One of the ways, just briefly, some of the things that we've been doing in Goshen as a city council is really number one is valuing the individuals in our community by saying to them, because we value you, because you're an important member of our society and our community, we want to actually create resolutions and ordinances that actually impact you in a positive way. And so as counselors, we have 4 years ago, I started my work as a service as a councilman. We passed a resolution on being good neighbors to one another. So we openly said to one another as counselors and also to the community, this is the way we want to have discourse in our community. And it means that it starts with civility. And so at that time when I come into council, it's really a moment where we say as each other to counselors and to the city, we hope that you enter in civil discourse as you go forward. We receive community development block grants as all communities do, and we within the city have been very, very intentional in the organizations that are supported through the CDBG monies. So therefore we are directing those dollars into not-for-profits, but also mental health centers, which would be Oak Lawn, and also Forma Health, which would be a center for healing and hope. The other thing that we're doing is we have changed our policy in terms of the type of support we offer to our staff, our city employees, in terms of counseling. So we're making that access more possible for our employees, and we're doing unlimited counseling services for our police officers and our firefighters. Just 2 years ago, we designated $400,000 very specifically for crisis center work. So we took $400,000 and channeled that to Oak Lawn Psychiatric, which just being here last week, Oak Lawn has opened up a new facility, right? And so we're saying to Oak Lawn in our community, we want you to actually be supportive of the community, and we want you to be engaged with more work on that. So we've designated about $400,000 for that. We've also realized that, so if we think of mental health policies, how many of us think of the American Disabilities Act as a mental health policy? It's a mental health policy, even if we don't think of it. So the American Disabilities Act really is again about access. And so in Goshen, we have said that we want to designate funds, and so we've designated about $350,000 toward an all-inclusive park, which is actually now opening the space for children and families who would fall under the ADA, and they have a space where they might be able to engage in those particular
play activities. I would also say that we are developing partnerships with local community organizations as a city, where we are saying to them, for example, 2 weekends now, we were a partner with the local nonprofit Community Pro Education, and they focus on health, culture, and education. And they held a Hispanic Heritage Festival. So the city became a partner with that organization and brought together over 12,000 people in downtown for a full afternoon and evening till 11 p.m. I was there till 2 in the morning, engaging in celebrating culture, creating an environment where people feel like they can actually come. So we, as a city, have opened those types of relationships, and then sitting down after those events and saying, what happened, how did it go, what do we need to do to improve, and how do we build those relationships. And finally, we're working very closely with our neighborhood associations. Our new mayor, Gina Lichty, which Mayor Stutzman stepped down a couple of months ago. Our Mayor Lichty is actually readjusting some of the work that she does with neighborhood associations, because we believe that residents who are in community are the ones who should be driving the work that we do. I think I would say that, just to sort of close here, I think it's important that we as advocates and you as leaders and us as who are in positions of leadership, that we should find ways for us to build the ability to strengthen relationships. It is really about, which I might have heard either Bauer or Rebecca say, or maybe one of the other speakers in your other panel, it's about relationships. And if we can build good and we can make good policy, then it means that we next need to build relationships with individuals. So I just want to applaud you all for the work that y'all are doing here in this community. And I follow the work that happens in South Bend through La Casa de Amistad. So good friends there, and just appreciate the work that the colleagues are doing and the Mental Health America is doing as well. So thank you.
Yes. I want to thank you personally, and I want to thank you all for being here. This has been incredible. We really appreciate your work. We really do, honestly. So thank you to each of our panelists for sharing about the important work you're doing, advocating for the community. We'll now open up the panel for questions. Please come to the microphone if anyone has a question for panelists. And actually, I think our mic is going to go around.
For the politicians, what are ways that you've seen faith-based communities get involved to support your efforts in legislation and be proactive? Or what are ways that you'd like to see faith-based communities get more involved to support the work that you're advocating for good mental health policy?
Mental health policies in particular, well, immediately I thought of wetlands because Catholic charities testified against the wetland bill that came forward to the Indiana General Assembly because they believe all life is precious and should be protected. And so they wanted to protect their habitat and the animals. So I was very surprised to find an ally in protecting our environment. But when it comes to mental health and health policy in general, I think it comes down to the service we're providing, public servants. I represent over 64,000 individuals. I represent people of all faiths. And so I listen to anyone who has argument about a particular issue or wants to share a personal story. And so I think whether it's a faith organization or not, having compassionate leadership is incredibly important to me as a public servant. And I think is a characteristic that we could help promote as we craft policy that does impact the entire state.
It's a great question. I think how I would maybe phrase it is that, again, as we engage the faith community, within mental health, there is a lot of there's the bio, the psycho, the social, and the spiritual. And so I think the ways that I myself, as a former pastor of pastors, I have worked with those individuals and pastors in helping them think about the ways that spirituality and mental health actually are a lot of how, especially in communities of color, when you think about the different types of folk healing, the ways that people heal. We are introducing as a city with faith communities. So at the Hispanic Heritage Festival, we invited Father Royce and Pastor Jose Luis Gutierrez, and saying to them, you can be a part of, we want you to be a part of this event, and actually why don't you get us started? And so they offered their own prayer. And again, it's a way of us saying to the faith community, you can participate, you can join us in the work, because you actually, as you are in neighborhood associations, we want you to feel as though you actually belong to this particular work. And so in my own past behavioral health life, I would have, I actually would have partnered very closely with churches, because within churches, there is a great amount of stigma, especially in communities of color in the Latinx community, like, don't go there. And so I think as we need to get closer, we need to strengthen those relationships, and we need to be invitational to communities to say, you can be a part of it. There is a church-state issue, but at the same time, we're trying to build community, and so therefore there can be a collaborative spirit.
At least for 1, 2 more questions.
Thank you so much. These are wonderful. I love y'all. This is a great panel. So amongst the three of you, there's a wealth of experience. I guess maybe speaking to what's the importance of kind of like, sometimes we think of innovation and inheritance kind of as like separate, but they're really symbiotic, I think. So in a way, like standing on what's worked in the past, but how do we innovate based on the knowledge that we have, like moving forward as far as mental health tactics? What are you like excited about? What are kind of maybe approaches or kind of new developments that you're excited about that will kind of help move forward with mental health?
I can see from my experience, I don't know if I call it innovation so much as imagination, but I remember during the pandemic, one of the nice things again was that I was on all these like webinars and stuff from all these amazing speakers, because that's what we did for entertainment. And I think it was Angela Davis talking about activism and imagination, spoke to the importance of imagination being people who are artists or dreamers are looking for not the way things are, but what they could be, and dreaming up the ways that we could do things differently. And I think that what we found a lot in our work and activism or advocating of the last couple of years was a lot of people who are sort of stuck with the way things were and were not quite able to set aside the sort of practical matters, which are very important in reality, and allow themselves to dream of the way things could be, and allow them to let themselves use their imagination to dream of new systems, to dream of new ways of interacting with people. So I am excited about like the crisis response center is supposed to open up, I think by December of this year, which would be fantastic because the holidays are always hard, I think, for some people. And but we have to continue to dream because there's still going to be gaps. This is still not going to solve the problems. So I'm already dreaming about how this is not going to be open to people who are younger than 18. How can we serve that population? We're still going to have big gaps in like substance use issues. I think we're gonna continue to have people with chronic mental illness, and this can't become like their second home. So how do we do that? And I think it's gonna take innovation and imagination to dream of something different.
I can briefly add to that. I mean, what I've been really impressed by is the action on these issues. So in my 3 years as a state representative, I've listed all these accomplishments. And so I've seen I've been able to check off a lot of things we really wanted to do. And to me, we need to talk about that. We need to celebrate that a little more. We're having conversations about really uncomfortable issues, which is not always easy, especially when it comes to politics. And the majority, the age of a lot of the legislators are a bit older, and they don't like to talk about mental health, these stigmas attached. And we're challenging this and providing services, investing in health when a lot of people didn't want to in the past. So we are seeing a shift in beliefs and what our role is. As you mentioned, read my biography, I am ranking minority member of Rural and Agricultural Development, and I am co-chair of the Rural Caucus. My district is urban. So I feel we find a lot of things in common with rural Indiana as we do in an urban community. We have gaps of care. We have food deserts. We have access to school that maybe we could find more in common with rural areas. So we are tackling some of those issues, having conversations about things that maybe we hadn't been doing before, which is incredible to be able to see. And I also want to shout out the investments in Oakland that we're seeing when I met with the St. Joseph County Sheriff's Department, the State House, and their crisis mobile units. They said, we're doing that. When people tell me we want a mobile crisis unit, we're doing that. So promoting these things, getting the word out, the Youth Service Bureau facility that they're building, that's going to be game-changing as well. So that's what excites me about what we're seeing.
You know, that's a great question, and I just appreciate it. I think that for me, it's three things. One is this notion of you have to go to the people. You have to really go ask the individuals, what are they experiencing? What's going on with their lives? And from that, then you can establish the work with the people. Second is we have to acknowledge that mental health treatment services cannot be done in one way. And by that I mean is it can't always be the medical model. We have to be open to the different ways of healing in communities. And then more specifically, because of the high health disparities, mental health disparities in communities of color, we have to be receptive to the work that organizations do that may not be your traditional mental health center. So like I appreciate Dr. Lark Wong, who at the Substance Abuse and Mental Service Administration at the federal level, she introduced a term called community-defined evidence, right? So we all have heard of evidence-based programs, but we've not heard about community-defined evidence programs. Community-defined evidence programs say, ooh, there's actually something going on really well in my community, and I need to support it. It might not have the empirical research, it might not have the data that it needs, but it is actually working. And third, I would say that for innovation, we have to see outside of the box of where we could actually do mental health type support, and not only see mental health as mental illness. So they're two very different things. And when I think of a possible innovation, you know, there's this thing happening in Goshen right now. They're called pop-ups. You ever been on a pop-up market?
Yes.
Pop-up. markets. I have all these kinds of entrepreneurs who are selling things. And there's just a lot of positive energy there. Have we explored the possibility of actually engaging people in those spaces around mental health? Because what do? People are there already in a disposition. We started Bienvenido or Welcome Circles in Ligonier, majority minority city in Indiana. There were more Latinos and white people in that community. And we said, let's sit in a circle because they are used to sitting in circles. And it's a collective model, it's a familism model, familismo, right? So you do those things, and we started that work in Ligonier, to coaching, right? We went to 13 cities in Indiana. We're doing a lot of work with mental health promotion with Latino immigrants, Latinx immigrants in about 7 Midwest states. So innovation happens when you go to people, you try it a different way, and you sort of look around your community and see what's going on, and you try to go there and build something from it.
Thank you so much. This is awesome. I'm gonna give it I want to introduce our closing speaker, Stephanie Murphy, Executive Director of the St. Joseph County Public Library.
Thank you so much. So twice in 1 week, I've gotten the short straw and gotten the very last slot of the day. So I don't mind, I promise to keep it short. So most people, when they think of libraries, do not think about mental health. But we are so pleased to be a partner with Mental Health Awareness of Michiana. It's our mission to connect members of our diverse community to learning, resources, culture, and each other. And through partnerships like our Compass model that Rana talked about earlier, we're able to connect people to the mental health and social service resources that they need. Beyond that, we're fully aware of the toll that loneliness is taking on the mental and physical health of people in our communities. And as one of the few free public spaces, we are working to engage patrons in a way that makes them feel seen and known, to invite them to join clubs and programs, and to create spaces that allow patrons to interact and connect with each other. And because we know that that connection is so important, not only to our patrons, but to people who work in fields together, we are so happy to be able to provide this space for the important work of today's Mental Health Summit, and to actively participate in collaborations that help address the mental health crisis we have in our country today. So we hope you met a few new people. We hope you learned something that you can take back to work with you. We really hope you fill out the survey, and we hope you have a great evening. Thank you so much for being here with us.